Chapter 726. A black dot appeared on the horizon. A black dot that was constantly moving. It was rapidly growing from a black dot to a black dot that spread across the horizon. That was not an illusion. It was not a wave that was rapidly dragging the world into darkness because of the setting sun. Instead, it was a black wave that was once a nightmare that humans feared once again descending upon the world. Vroom, vroom, vroom. Amidst the rumbling of the thrusters, there were a large number of black mechs that were somewhat similar to ants that were rapidly advancing toward the target in front of them in a certain formation. As they moved, they stirred up billowing smoke mixed with snowflakes. Amidst the billowing smoke, there was a white mech that was even larger and scarier than these black mechs. Under the escort of these black mechs, it steadily advanced forward towards the city the humans built and settled down in. That kind of vast momentum would not make anyone have a good impression of it. This was because the moment the black line appeared, both sides that were fighting on the battlefield in the suburbs of Edmonton received a warning from their loyal comrades. Among them, Lars Horn and Grez's troops were the most fearsome. That piercing warning, that familiar yet unfamiliar warning text, it made the new pilots that were born 300 years after the end of the sacrificial war panic, and some even seemed to be at a loss of what to do. Hasmon, the ancient enemy from the sacrificial war era? How is that possible? Memories that were buried in the dust of history surfaced. The new pilots, including Lars Horn and Grez, ignored Gauda, Barbados, Gusion, and Meteor, who were fighting with them because of the sudden appearance of the ancient enemy. Fortunately, Barbados and Gusion, who were once the main forces of the humans during the Ursa War, also let out an ear-piercing shriek when the black line spread across the horizon, causing the Mitsuyuki and Akihiro to stop their attacks. Hey, Mitsuyuki, Akihiro, what happened? Ma, what is that? Through the Alea consciousness system, the MS pilots of the Iron Flower Regiment quickly understood what the black tide that spread across the horizon was. But in the end, they still reacted the same way as the new generation of pilots on Gallahorn's side. I don't understand. It was hard to understand. However, I know that they are enemies. Akihiro shook his head vigorously and no longer paid attention to the data constantly emerging from the Alea consciousness system. Yes, I don't really understand either. However, the white body surrounded by the black body seems to be Barbados' prey. On the other hand, the three suns and moons seem to have further confirmed the identity of the other party. They immediately locked onto the white airframe. At first glance, it looked like the white airframe that the three suns and moons had seen after arriving on Earth. The battlefield, which was still in a fierce battle, fell into silence because of the sudden appearance of the black tide. But soon, Lars Horn's side retreated first, not caring whether the Iron Flower Regiment would pursue them or not. What's more, Lars Horn's troops, who were currently preventing the Iron Flower Regiment from crossing the bridge and were stationed at the entrance of Edmonton, directly announced a temporary truce, which made Olga, who was observing the situation on the side, very confused. What the hell is going on? Lars Horn actually took the initiative to ask for a truce with us? Olga, who was standing on the rear cabin of the mobile engineer, didn't react for a moment, but soon the communication from the rear made him understand what was going on. Commander, something bad has happened. Ryder's figure rushed out from the back of the tree. While gasping for air, he raised his head and looked at Olga. Commander. Just now, the three suns and moons sent back a message. It seems that a large number of enemies appeared in the north of Edmonton suburbs. It is said that they are the culprits of the sacrificial disaster. Ryder, who had an anxious face, said the last sentence, but unexpectedly stopped. What? Sacrificial disaster? Didn't that thing already end 300 years ago? On the way from Mars to Earth, Olga saw too many traces of the sacrificial disaster left in this world. Commander, let me explain. Before Ryder could speak again, a pleasant voice came from the communication channel. It was Lax Klein. Miss Lax, what happened at the rear? Hearing Lax's voice, Olga's expression immediately became respectful. It's M.A. Although I don't know what happened, the enemy that appeared in the north of Edmonton suburbs is the product of the sacrificial disaster 300 years ago in May Hammonds. What? The enemy from 300 years ago appeared again? In an instant, Olga's thoughts stopped. No matter how brave Olga was, no matter how much he dared to fight, when faced with an ancient enemy that had disappeared for 300 years and suddenly revived in this era, it was inevitable that his reaction would be slow. Yes, it is the enemy from the sacrificial disaster 300 years ago. On this point, Larshorn's Seven Stars family, Kalta Yethu, has the right to speak. Standing on the roof of the train station that was temporarily requisitioned by the Ironflower Regiment as a temporary base, Lax put down the headset and passed it to the silver-haired girl standing beside her who had removed her disguise. The silver-haired girl retracted her gaze and looked at the headset that Lax passed to her. After a while, she took the headset. I'm Kalta Yethu. On the other side of the line is the commander of the Ironflower Regiment, Olga Iska, right? Yes, I'm Olga. This is the first time we've had a formal conversation. The eldest daughter of the Seven Stars family, Kalta Yethu. Although Olga was shocked by Kalta's words, she still retaliated. In response, Kalta didn't have any reaction. Right now, she would only focus on the black-tide line that was getting closer and closer. This was not only her idea, but also the responsibility of the Seven Stars family, an innate responsibility. Even though this responsibility had long been forgotten by the Seven Stars family in the past 300 years. Commander Olga, listen carefully. The enemy that appeared in the north of Edmonton suburbs is the enemy from the sacrificial disaster era, the murderer that slaughtered a quarter of the population in May Hammonds. Although I don't know why it appeared here. Thanks to it, I'm afraid that Gallahorn's attention has shifted from the Ironflower Regiment to them. Olga couldn't help but nod at Kalta's speculation. Yes, Larshorn has already signaled a temporary truce to us. After receiving Olga's confirmation, Kalta didn't immediately reply, but looked at Lux. However, all she saw was Lux's nonchalant smile, as if she was not frightened by the awakening of her ancient enemy. You, Lux Klein, aren't you afraid? Lux's calmness made Kalta suddenly feel that her nerves were a bit tense, because of Emme's appearance seemed a bit ridiculous. No, I'm afraid, but I believe that everything that suddenly happened will end. Isn't it? Kalta frowned. She didn't understand why Lux was so calm, and she didn't understand the meaning of Lux's words. In the end, she just continued to speak into the headset. Commander Olga, withdraw the troops. Gather all the troops that can be used, and then make a choice, retreat, or stay here and fight. In Kalta's mind, she naturally wanted the Ironflower Regiment to stay here and continue to fight. This was not only because the Ironflower Regiment had Gauda's skeleton that hunted Emme, but also because the Free Gauda hadn't come back to join the Ironflower Regiment. Kalta believed that as long as these bodies could be gathered, they should be able to resist Emme's attack. But now, as a captive, Kalta Yethu didn't have any right to say this request. Then, before Olga could react, Lux took back the headset from Kalta. Commander Olga, withdraw. Sir Shermiao and Gudelia have succeeded. The next thing is how we should make our own decision. Listening to Lux's words, Olga thought for a moment and responded. Good. In that case, the Ironflower Regiment will withdraw. In this way, the battle between the Ironflower Regiment and Larshorn could be considered to have come to an end for the time being. However, the chaos caused by the battle was far from over. Gudelia, you just gave a great speech. It's also thanks to you that everyone here recognizes me as Abro's representative. As the applause lingering in the venue gradually subsided, Shermiao, who welcomed Gudelia off the stage, also praised and thanked her. However, Gudelia unexpectedly sensed the strangeness behind Shermiao's words. Representative Shermiao, what's going on? Despite being nervous, Gudelia was keenly aware that the atmosphere in the venue seemed to have changed. More and more people came in from the outside, as if they brought some unsettling news into the venue that had just ended. Maybe the goddess of fate is playing a joke on us. The old man in front of Gudelia showed a wry smile, then looked at Gudelia Lana Bernstein, one of the contributors that allowed him to continue to be the representative of Abro, and said with a solemn expression, "Now, an airframe older than me is leading its army to our city, Edmonton. It is expected to arrive in half an hour." Ancient airframe? Army. Gudelia didn't react for a while, but she vaguely noticed something. Yes, an ancient airframe, an ancient enemy. The murderer of the sacrificial war, the disaster that almost caused the extinction of human beings, has awakened again in our era. Shermiao moved her gaze and looked at the position where her opponent, Enli Frere, was. There was no one there. When she got the news that the MA army was heading to Edmonton, Enli Frere, who had lost her momentum, got up and left on the spot. It was not difficult to see that the woman, who relied on the help of the big tree behind her and almost ascended to the position of the representative of Abro, was probably going to seek help from her supporters. However, now in this situation, I'm afraid that the supporter behind Enli Frere, the head of the Farid family, one of the 7-star families is Nerio Farid, would not help her. Thinking of this, Shermiao's gaze suddenly condensed. Now is not the time to think about these things. Everyone, quiet. The cane hit the ground. Shermiao's voice sounded, and the attention of the entire venue was focused on her. I believe you all know the current situation. I won't say anything more. The next thing is to evacuate all the citizens of Edmonton as much as possible within half an hour. Don't complain that you can't do it. Those who can't do it will stand here in Edmonton and wait for the MA army to come. Shermiao's voice was very old, but at this moment, it was extraordinarily powerful and penetrating. Even if some people have opinions in their hearts, they can't say it. Because the situation is really, as Shermiao said, if you can't do it, you can only stand here in Edmonton and wait for death. The MA army is not pirates, nor are they robbers. The latter only seeks money and objects, but the former is the most fundamental purpose of exterminating human beings. Yes. Then, see you later. Representative Shermiao. As the number 2 figure of the Shermiao faction, Alisi expressed his attitude and actions on the spot. Under his leadership, the members of the Shermiao faction took the lead in completing the mobilization and began to evacuate the citizens as much as possible within half an hour. Seeing this, the members of other factions also followed their footsteps. It was simply a fantasy to evacuate all the residents of the city in half an hour. But they had to do it. Looking at the empty venue, Shermiao exhaled slightly and looked at Gudelia. Sorry, Gudelia. We have to start the operation right away. If you want to join the Taiwan regiment, I will arrange for someone to send you out of the city. But I don't recommend you do this. Shermiao said as she looked out of the window. Unfortunately, due to the blockage of the building, Shermiao did not see the terrible black tide coming towards Edmonton. Gudelia subconsciously wanted to ask to join the Taiwan regiment, but when the words came to her mouth, she hesitated. She knew that if she ran back to the Taiwan regiment now, she was afraid that the Taiwan regiment would be distracted to protect her. After all, the older the ginger, the spicier. Shermiao saw Gudelia's worry at a glance. Gudelia, or, you wait a moment, I will arrange for someone to contact the Taiwan regiment now. If you want to go or stay, wait until you contact them, okay? Gudelia was silent for a moment, then nodded. I'm counting on you. Representative Shermiao. You're welcome. For me, whether it's the Taiwan regiment or you, Gudelia Lana Bernstein, are my benefactors. Yes. So, is His Excellency Ray Minkai? I presume that His Excellency, who galloped through the sky, is rushing back here right now. If he is here, we may be able to rest assured. Chapter 727. The sound of gunfire was incessant. The rumbling explosions had already occupied the wilderness outside of Edmonton. The thick smoke that rose into the air tore apart the sky of Edmonton, deeply stinging the eyes of the people who were forced to evacuate from their homes. Boom, boom, boom. So what if they were unwilling? Facing the roar of the explosion that came from the outskirts, and the sudden revival of the ancient and terrifying enemy that came out of the legends from 300 years ago was telling them a fact. This place was no longer suitable for humans to live in. Quick, Quick! Other than the necessary clothes, documents, and enough money to last for a period of time, everyone must evacuate in light clothes. Please don't worry about your future. Everyone's losses will be borne by Abro. But the premise is that everyone can listen to orders and evacuate from Edmonton as soon as possible. Quick! Elderly, women and children, go this way. Quick! Quick! Edmonton's security forces were deployed in full force, but they were already stretched to the limit. Representative Shermiao, our security forces can't hold on anymore. Can you inform Lars Horn and ask them to send people to support us? Alisi ran to Shermiao's side with sweat all over his head and asked while panting. But this idea only received a shake of Shermiao's head. Right now, Lars Horn's command system in Edmonton is in chaos. To be able to hold on until now, it's all because of Lars Horn's discipline and sense of mission. What? Alisi didn't react for a moment. Alisi, what happens next, we have to rely on ourselves. Isnario Farid, the man who was supposed to be standing here in command of Gallowhound's forces in Edmonton, is missing. Shermiao looked at the sky that was torn apart by the thick smoke, and his face became more and more solemn. The fact was indeed so. The moment they discovered M.A. Hammond's leading its AI servant army, Lars Horn's troops at the front line immediately sent a warning to Isnario Farid. But in the end, there was nothing. Not only that, even the communications sent to Lars Horn's headquarters suddenly stopped working. From that moment on, Lars Horn's unit in Edmonton could be described as a lone army that had been cut off from the rear. It was the bold decision of those frontline commanders, including Lars Horn, to make a temporary truce with the Taiwan Regiment. Not to mention the crisis of serious disagreement on whether to decide to meet the sudden appearance of the MA Army on the spot or to temporarily evacuate Edmonton. As a result, in this crisis, 1/3 of Lars Horn's forces that were previously fighting with the Iron Flower Regiment broke away from the main force and chose to temporarily withdraw from Edmonton, seeking an opportunity to contact Lars Horn's headquarters as quickly as possible. The rest were the main forces that decided to stay behind to protect Edmonton. As such, those commanders who made such a decision, including Lars Horn, naturally knew that this was undoubtedly a dead end. The MA army that had brought disaster to mankind 300 years ago had become an unreachable legend. Even if these new generation of frontline commanders had the courage to face death, they would be confused when dealing with these enemies that came out of the legend. How to fight? The frontline commanders, including Lars Horn, who had lost their unified command, had this question at the same time. But this question did not hinder their decision. Just like that, the battle began. And near the train station where the Taiwan Regiment was located, traces of the MA Army also appeared. However, because there were only a small number of small MA soldiers called Blumen, the train station protected by Gauda Barbados, Gauda Gasayon, and Meteor did not suffer much pressure. But this was only temporary. Commander Olga, I hope the Taiwan Regiment can evacuate from the train station, enter Edmonton as soon as possible, and even find the next safe evacuation point through Edmonton. What Olga did not expect was that when they returned to the train station, Kalta, who greeted them with Lakis, said such words. What? Olga asked. Barbados and Gasayon. The reason given by Kalta pointed to Gauda Barbados and Gauda Gasayon. At the end of the War of Sacrifice, the 72 demons created by mankind had become the primary goal of the MA Army. Just as mankind sniped the MA Army's main brain, such as Hammond's, who controlled the army, the MA Army was also sniping the 72 demons created by mankind. You said that as long as the existence of the two Gauda Barbados and Gasayon was discovered by those small MA soldiers and notified the MA Army that was attacking Edmonton, it would cause the MA Army to attack this train station instead. Lakis followed Kalta's words and put forward an idea. Yes, this is very likely to happen, but I'm not sure. Kalta said in the end, but also confessed that it was just her assumption. In the 300 years that the MA Army has been missing, the information about them has been obliterated by the long years. The information that can be preserved is basically locked in Lars Horn's headquarters. With my authority, I can't get access to this information. Even if you're the heir of one of the seven-star families, the U family? Biscat, who was listening silently, pressed his hat to cover his eyes. He was looking at Kalta, trying to find a flaw in her expression. Yes, even if I am the heir of the U family, the only person who can master the deepest and most fundamental secrets of Lars Horn is the current head of the seven-star family. No, I'm afraid that even the head of the family can't get access to these secrets. What? How is this possible? Olga couldn't believe that the head of one of the seven-star families who controlled Lars Horn couldn't get the secrets buried in history. No. It's very possible. At the top of the seven-star family of Lars Horn, there is the existence of the oldest man. He was Duke Bagulanzon, the current head of the Bagulanzon family. At the same time, he was also the oldest among the seven heads of the Seven Stars clans. Therefore, only he would be able to grasp the secrets buried in history. I'm afraid this won't be of any help to the current situation. What we have to do now is to find a chance of survival in this turmoil. Unlike Olga and the others, Lux wasn't shocked by the secret of the Seven Stars family. Instead, she calmly pulled everyone's attention back to reality. Cough, that's right. I'm afraid that the Lars Horn troops in the city have already gone out of the city to fight with the MA army. That is to say, we have a chance to enter the city smoothly. Viscat, inform Eugene, prepare to withdraw to Edmonton, and meet with His Excellency Sher Meow and Gudelia. Yes, head. Seeing that Olga had made her decision, Biscat answered loudly and turned to leave. Looking at the back of Biscat's departure, Olga showed a rare trace of worry. Miss Lakis, I don't know when His Excellency Ray Minkai will come back to join us. In Olga's view, if there is Ray Minkai and Freegauda, I am afraid that they will not be so passive as to immediately withdraw to Edmonton. Head Olga, please rest assured, Kai will come back to join us. Now, we should do what we can do. Lakis smiled softly and said calmly. In addition, Kalta, you are free. What? What? Lakis suddenly announced that Kalta was free, making Olga and Kalta unable to react for a while. Lakis smiled, and her eyes were full of the brilliance of penetrating Kalta's heart. Just now, when the MA army appeared, Kalta, your eyes were anxious and worried. You want to go to that battlefield, right? As a soldier of Lars Horn, and as the heir of the seven-star family, the U family, Kalta moved his mouth and didn't know what to say for a while. Indeed, at the moment when he found out that the MA army appeared on the outskirts of Edmonton, Kalta's heart was anxious and worried. If it weren't for his identity at the moment, he would have driven his beloved machine, led his subordinates to the front line, and fought fiercely with the ancient enemies who came out of the legends. Kalta's inner fluctuations were not left on his face. Looking at Kalta's changing face, Lakis smiled softly and turned to look at Olga. Head Olga, we should have extra mobile engineers here, right? But Olga frowned. Apparently he did not understand Lakis's actions at the moment. It's okay. Head Olga, Kalta just wants to fight as a soldier of Lars Horn, as the heir of one of the seven-star family, the U family, to defend human life. Olga's eyes changed, but he did not say any words of refusal, and finally he looked at Kalta. As a result, he saw a pair of eyes that were expecting Olga to agree. Surprise, doubt, there was also a trace of fear. Lakis instigated Kalta with just a few words, making him forget that he was still a captive of the Taiwan regiment, and his mind was full of thoughts of rushing to the battlefield and fighting with the MA army. Okay, we do have spare mobile engineer troops. I can drive. Since I can drive the MS, I will definitely drive the simple transport of the mobile engineers. This, I promise in the name of you. Without waiting for Olga to finish, Kalta patted his chest and said loudly, for fear that Olga would refuse in the next second. Olga looked at Kalta and then looked at the confident Lakis and nodded silently. Then goodbye. The head of the Iron Flower Regiment, Olga Iska and Lakis Klein. As long as I can find the main force smoothly, then no one will hinder the Iron Flower Regiment from entering the city. Kalta paused, suddenly turned around, looked at Lakis seriously, clenched his fist, and knocked on his chest, and said solemnly, "Lakis Klein, I hope you can bring a message for me to the knight who captured me. Please speak." Lakis nodded slightly. Kalta took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with determination. It was the determination to face death. "If I am still alive after this battle that concerns the life and death of mankind, I hope to fight with the knight again. I promise you. At the same time, I also agree to your request on behalf of Kai, Ray Minkai. Kalta you. As long as you are still alive, then Ray Minkai will wait for your challenge." Lakis nodded slightly and solemnly accepted Kalta's challenge for Ray Minkai. "Thank you. Then, see you later." Kalta left. In the dress that was fluttering in the cold wind, Kalta jumped on the new joint mobile engineer that Diaz supported for the Ironflower Regiment, started the engine, and quickly left the train station. "Head Olga. Let's start evacuating." Looking at the mobile engineer that disappeared behind the jungle, Lakis raised his head and looked at the sky that was already filled with smoke. At the same time, the Gauda's Samanli cavalry that evacuated from the snowfield in the north and headed to Edmonton at the fastest speed finally arrived at the tragic battlefield that reappeared the legend in the next moment after the fierce battle between the MA Army and Lars Horn's troops. The shrill alarm, the red flash that filled the eyeballs, and the warning pattern that almost covered most of the screen and many flashing data were telling the Gau, the Samanli cavalry, of fact. Its old enemy, after a long period of 300 years, woke up. Just like the Gauda Samanli cavalry was awakened by human beings, the terrible MA army was also awakened by human beings at this moment. What happened? Hammonds. Galio stared blankly at the black wave that occupied most of the suburbs of Edmonton and shook the defense line hastily established by Lars Horn's troops. Finally, Galio understood one thing from the scenes that happened in front of him and the many data that scrolled past on the screen. War of sacrifice did happen. Coincidentally, the moment Galio understood what was going on, an extremely dazzling light suddenly erupted from the black waves. In that instant, it stole the last rays of the setting sun and engulfed the outskirts of Edmonton in darkness. Boom! The terrible energy explosion tore the sky in an instant. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In the roar, the beam of light that was gathered by the terrible energy was like the sword of God's punishment in myths. It slashed down from the sky and swept through the defense line established by Lars Horn. In the blink of an eye, the temporary defense line established by Lars Horn's troops collapsed on the spot. The black wave formed by the huge number of blue men did not wait for the energy fluctuations left by the terrible beam to dissipate. They rushed into the defense line along the open defense line and wantonly hunted all the humans found by these ruthless AI servants. Not good. Whether Galio was willing to believe what he saw or not, everything in front of him and the sound of communication in his ears told him a fact. If Lars Horn's troops, who were desperately resisting the invaders, did not receive support, the almost collapsed defense line would really be finished. Roar! At this moment, before Galio could take action, a thunderous roar resounded throughout the battlefield. Then, several missiles, dozens of missiles, hundreds of missiles, rose into the air from behind the buildings in Edmonton and poured down like a torrential rain on the heads of the MA army led by Hammonds. Almost at the same time, after the overwhelming number of missiles, two attacks that were no less powerful than the beam attack launched by the MA army came one after another. They followed the footsteps of the missile rain and pierced through the black wave led by blue men. Boom, boom, boom. The explosions set off by the continuous missile rain, and the two beams of light that almost wiped out the black wave that rushed into the defense line made Galio fall into an unbelievable shock. And in this shock, the electronic eyes of Gao Da's Simonese cavalry were constantly zooming in and out, looking at the location where such a terrible attack broke out, somewhere in Edmonton. Amidst the billowing smoke, a steel lion with a dazzling array of heavy equipment suddenly appeared on the screen. Its entire body was filled with faint light, and it carried all sorts of equipment on its back. The two beam cannons that still had traces of active energy sparks still lingering on its back led to dazzling heavy equipment. Chapter 728. The outskirts of the city. The buildings in the city. Two gigantic metal machines that looked like giant steel beasts that had walked out of the desolation era confronted each other from afar. The attack just now was undoubtedly a signal to announce its existence. Whether it was the MA named Hammonds, it was still the steel lion that was covered in a large number of shocking heavy equipment. Both were declaring their strength to the other. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In the wilderness, Hammond stared at the steel lion that had appeared in the middle of Edmonton for a long time. It seemed to be searching for information on the steel lion in its database. But in the end, it found nothing. Regardless of whether it was the AI that had exterminated the humans or the humans that had paid a huge price to defeat the AI, there was no mention of the steel lion. What do we do? Hammond's thought process was very complicated, but also very simple. All of M.A. Hammond's actions serve one purpose. That was to exterminate the humans. The identity of the steel lion was unknown, but Hammonds determined that the existence of the steel lion was the greatest obstacle to his plan to exterminate the human race. Thus, countless energy sparks burst out from Hammond's sharp beak. At the same time, the black tide that had been crushed by the steel lion's preemptive attack, Blumen's servant army, gathered once again, swarming towards Edmonton through the gap in the defense line that they had broken through. Seeing this scene, the soldiers of Gallowhorn who had survived the collapse of the defensive line were scared out of their wits. They frantically fled towards both ends of the defensive line. Even though these fleeing Gallowhorn soldiers could still meet some strong-willed companions along the way, they were powerless to do anything. Although the Steel Lion's terrifying attack had allowed Lars Horn to maintain the defensive line that was on the verge of collapse, in the following attack, both sides had enough map editor equipment to change the terrain of the defensive line. If they still chose to stay in the defensive line that existed in name only, they would be courting death. Helplessly, there was only one choice left for the Gallowhorn soldiers. Retreat. Evacuate as fast as possible. They had to try their best to escape from the battle between the two terrifying titans that seemed to have walked out of a fairy tale in the shortest time possible. The fleeing humans did not attract the attention of the Blumen army. Under the command of M.A. Hammonds, the Blumen army had already identified the Steel Lion as their number one threat. The rolling waves swept across the entire defensive line like a black wave, rushing to the edge of Edmonton in an unstoppable manner. TSK. As expected, it still didn't work. Those nano-coatings are really annoying. The earth-shattering beam attack that reversed the collapse of the defensive line did not seem to satisfy the Steel Lion. Originally, he thought that he would be able to penetrate through Blumen's army of servants and attack Hammonds, who was hiding behind them. However, Longhorn Lion Zero discovered that the effect of his beam attack was far from what he had expected. However, after breaking through Lars Horn's defensive line, a huge gap was created in Blumen's army. Boom! Time did not allow Longhorn Lion Zero to hesitate any longer, because when the black wave of Blumen's army passed through Lars Horn's defensive line, M.A. Hammond's beam cannon followed. This beam attack had a blazing temperature that was enough to melt any high-rise building in Edmonton. It crossed the top of Lars Horn's defensive line and penetrated through the path that the black wave of Blumen's army of servants had opened. It blasted straight towards Longhorn Lion Zero. With this attack, Longhorn Lion Zero would not be able to escape. No, looking at the incoming beam attack, the long-fanged lion was not afraid at all. There was even a hint of excitement in the pair of golden pupils. Roar! A huge roar sounded, and the beam cannon on Longhorn Lion Zero's back suddenly erupted with a beam attack that was not inferior to M.A. Hammond's beam attack. Rumble! A strong energy reaction instantly filled the buildings in Edmonton. Wherever it passed, the glass windows on the building were first torn apart by the vibrating air, and then the blazing high temperature burned the window frame, completely igniting the terrible scene of the room that was particularly messy due to the emergency evacuation. In this terrifying scene, the two beams of light collided with each other. Boom! different enemies. The energy beams that shot out instantly became a dazzling sun that lit up the nearby suburbs. In an instant, the terrifying energy reaction not only erupted with all the brilliance that it could produce, but also relied on the energy that was enough to instantly melt the buildings in the center of the collision to raise the city center where M.A. Hammonds and Longhorn Line Zero were clashing. In just a short moment, the confrontation between the two razed the city center to the ground. The mushroom cloud that soared into the sky, the blazing storm that dispersed the unique cold of winter. There was also the shocking crater caused by the explosion. It made Galio, who had just entered the battlefield, feel frightened, and all the hair on his body stood on end. Is it still an enemy that humans can contend with? The same thought existed not only in Galio's heart, but also in the hearts of Lars Horn's soldiers who had just retreated from the defensive line and received the protection of Gao de Simon's cavalry. If they had not escaped fast enough, they would have been buried in the confrontation between M.A. Hammonds and Longhorn Line Zero. The sound of the wind seemed to remain with the roar of the violent energy reaction just now. The air was filled with the unique burnt smell after the explosion. In the eyes, there were melted buildings, as well as the debris that was swallowed by the flames. In such a terrible scene, the two steel machines were still confronting each other. They were not hurt by the terrible energy collision just now. Above them, the surging black waves, Blue Man's army did not slow down and rushed straight into the crater caused by the earth-shattering explosion, unwaveringly rushing toward Longhorn Line Zero. TCH, annoying bug. Compared to the large number of Blue Man's servants, the momentum created by the Long Fong Lion, State Zero, was very large, but it was all alone. While the tusked Lion Type Zero was on guard against Hammond's actions, it once again opened up the heavy equipment launchers on its body, revealing missiles that were ready to be fired. In the next second, the sea of missiles that appeared when Longhorn Line Zero first appeared again. The missiles rose into the air, and the smoke from the launch was enough to drown Longhorn Line Zero, causing it to disappear in front of M.A. Hammond's eyes. However, it was only limited to the optical camera's field of view. After discovering that Longhorn Line Zero's figure disappeared, M.A. Hammonds constantly switched to other types of cameras in order to grasp Longhorn Line Zero's whereabouts. As a result, after the tusked Line Zero used up all the ammunition it carried, it didn't move again. M.A. Hammonds could not understand such a move, but it did not hinder its next move. The sea of missiles was ignored by M.A. Hammonds. As long as it did not threaten its own safety, even if Blue Man's army suffered heavy losses, it would not affect its actions. As a result, a sea of fire ignited in front of M.A. Hammonds. The sea of missiles whistled from the sky and exploded madly in the midst of Blue Man's army. One by one, the rising fireballs and sound became the prelude to Blue Man's army's attack on Longhorn Line Zero. It became the last and most solid obstacle before Blue Man's army could reach Longhorn Line Zero. No matter how the Black Wave attacked Longhorn Line Zero's missile defense line, still, not a single Blue Man was able to break through the sea of fire that swallowed many Blue Man. As time went by, even if M.A. Hammonds did not notice, the humans at the edge of the battlefield eventually found some clues. That lion's ammunition is unlimited? How can it maintain such a dense attack without stopping? Galio stared blankly at the steel lion that was still steadily controlling the entrance to Edmonton. Although the smoke from the missile launch had covered most of the steel lion's figure, Galio was certain that during this period of time, no one had approached the steel lion of unknown origin that was fighting against the Black Wave led by M.A. Hammonds. Galio's Special Agent Major. There's a situation. At this moment, a communication was transmitted to the cockpit of Gao Da's Simonli cavalry. Looking at the source of the signal, it was actually from one of the NK-17 mobile engineers on the left side of Gao Da's Simonli cavalry. What's the matter? If you want to retreat, then retreat on your own. I still need to stay here for a while. Galio didn't pay attention to the communication and just casually responded with a grunt. But unexpectedly, an unexpected voice came. Galio, I haven't seen you for a few days, and you've become so arrogant. It was a voice that made people feel like they needed a beating, but it was also a very familiar voice that made Galio shiver. Kalta. Amidst the doubtful voice, Kalta's head appeared in front of Galio. However, that familiar face did not have the strange makeup from before, and it looked exceptionally plain. Galio, organize the personnel and evacuate. I'm afraid this battlefield is not something we can handle. Without waiting for Galio to speak, Kalta, who suddenly appeared, quickly said, Wait, you want us to evacuate? Although I don't know how you came back, but now that the enemy from the era of sacrificial war has revived, how can we evacuate? Galio shook his head and tried to reject Kalta's request. No, you saw the power that Emma displayed just now. If it wasn't for the lion restraining it, I'm afraid the soldiers gathered around the Samanli cavalry would have already been wiped out. Kalta poked his head out of the NK-17 mobile engineers and looked at the Lars Horn soldiers who were discussing the new joint mobile engineers with the Iron Flower Regiment's insignia and continued to speak. Now, only the Gauda Samanli cavalry can fight against the MA Hammonds, but how long do you think the Samanli cavalry can last under the attack of the MA Hammonds? Kalta made Galio speechless. Not only that, Galio also felt a sense of strangeness. When they met again, Kalta's tone was the same as before, but her expression and eyes were different. What the hell is going on? Did the Iron Flower Regiment do something to Kalta? Galio, are you listening to me? While the MA Hammonds is restrained by the lion, we need to quickly lead the soldiers out of this dangerous area. Kalta paused for a moment, then continued. To be honest, at the beginning, I did want to fight to the death with the Lars Horn soldiers here to resist the attack of the MA Hammonds. But after seeing the battle between the lion and the MA Hammonds, I came to a realization. Right now, we're just bugs to them, insects that do not pose a threat to them at all. Only by retreating can we obtain more power from the headquarters to resist the enemy that has recovered from the era of sacrificial wars. But, Galio, the citizens of Edmonton have already begun to evacuate. Otherwise, why would the lion stand at the entrance of Edmonton and confront the MA Hammonds? You must know that the lion belongs to the Iron Flower Regiment. No, it belongs to the knight who captured me. What? Suddenly, a sharp whistle came from the sky, interrupting the conversation between Galio and Kalta. It's him. He's back. Kalta, who had once again poked her head out of the NK-17's cockpit, looked up at the sky and saw a pair of wings of light flying past. The wings of light were very familiar, causing a complicated expression to appear on Kalta's face. Hatred? Resentment? Or perhaps Kalta didn't know how he would feel when he saw the pair of wings again. However, at this moment, Kalta gradually heaved a sigh of relief. Galio, evacuate. Now is the time. Galio had clearly seen the complicated expression on Kalta's face when he saw the pair of wings of light passing over his head. But in the end, Galio only nodded silently, then loudly ordered. All mobile engineers that can move, bring all the Gallowhound soldiers that are present. We will evacuate immediately and contact the headquarters as soon as possible. Yes. Gallowhorn's side, which had been defending the defensive line, withdrew. The only ones left on the battlefield were Hammonds and the AI army led by the Fong Lion Type 0, and the Free Gauda who descended from the sky. Chapter 729. Smoke billowed. Under the attack of the Black Wave, Edmonton, which was still holding a meeting to decide the future representative of Abro, was now in ruins. Everywhere was filled with flames that engulfed everything. In the billowing smoke and the sea of fire that wantonly burned everything, a black mech named Bloomin rushed out fearlessly from the sea of fire and rushed towards the steel lion standing at the end of the street. The roar of the propulsion engine. The cannon on Bloomin's jaw followed Bloomin's jump and launched a fierce attack towards the steel lion. Bang! Bang! The moment the flames set off by the explosion of ammunition lit up in the black wave, The metal storm created by countless artillery shells suddenly enveloped the long-fanged lion. But the long-fanged lion was extremely disdainful of the terrifying metal storm. Humph! Piece of cake. The moment the cold golden light flashed through the pupils of long-tusked lion-style Zisher, a shimmering barrier suddenly enveloped long-tusked lion-style Zisher, blocking the metal storm that was half a step behind. It directly thwarted Blue Man's plan to use concentrated fire to defeat long-tusked lion-style Zisher. Now, it's not about who has more people to win this battle. Idiot! Long-fanged Lion, State Zero, was not stingy with its mocking laughter. It did not care if Hammonds and its army could understand its words. Now that he had fully grasped the Lambda Drive system, the Tusked Lion Zero was not afraid of the Hammonds army, which was extremely powerful in terms of offensive capabilities. As long as the long-fanged lion's own cooling ability could keep up with the rhythm of the battle, then the army led by Hammonds would not be able to do anything to the long-fanged lion. Looking at the increasing number of bullets on the Lambda Drive system's barrier, the long-fanged lion snorted coldly. Humph! I'll return it to you. In an instant, the bullets that were blocked by the barrier were bounced back by an unknown force. With the long-fanged lion as the starting point, the metal storm in front of the long-fanged lion exploded. Perhaps Hammonds did not expect that the long-fanged lion's barrier that blocked the attack of the long-fanged lion's army would have the ability to bounce back attacks. The long-fanged lion's army used the Lambda Drive system's power to counter the attacks of the long-fanged lion's army with a faster and stronger attack. All of the long-fanged lion's army that rushed in front of the long-fanged lion were annihilated. The only thing left in this world was the momentary brilliance that represented death. After the thick smoke dissipated, it scattered on the ground. It was impossible to tell what it originally looked like. All that was left was the debris that had been torn apart by the pockmarked bullet marks. At this moment, there seemed to be a slight error in Hammond's system. It did not understand where the power of the long-fanged lion's army's power came from. It was also impossible to find any related or similar descriptions or records in the system. Perhaps, the moment the Tusked Lion Zero appeared and blocked its path, the warning message that could not be parsed had already begun to spread through Hammond's system. Attack! 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 An enemy that they couldn't analyze was blocking their way. On M.A. Hammond's radar, it clearly pointed out that there were a large number of humans gathered in the streets behind the long-fanged Lion Zero. Exterminate the human race. When M.A. Hammonds was born, it was implanted into the system's bottom layer. The existence of this source program was more important than anything else, and it affected all of Hammond's actions. Under the influence of the origin sequence, the warning that could not be analyzed was quickly ignored by M.A. Hammonds, leaving only the original purpose of the operation. The M.A. Hammonds suddenly spread out its wing-like shoulders, and the propulsion engine on its back erupted with dazzling flames. The M.A. Hammonds moved. M.A. Hammonds, who had been staying at the back of Blue Man's army since the start of the match, finally made his move. As Ma Hammond sped up, the Blue Man army, who had been surrounding him and had not participated in the attack, also sped up. Amidst the billowing dust, they charged directly into Edmonton. Oomph. Finally can't sit still anymore? Seeing that M.A. Hammonds had finally charged out, the long-fanged Lion Zero snorted coldly and prepared to engage in close combat with M.A. Hammonds. Although the previous exchange of gunfire was refreshing, the long-fanged Lion Zero preferred close combat. This was not only the preference of the long-fanged Lion Zero, but also the nature of a beast. No matter how strong the weapon, it would be better to use its claws to tear the enemy apart. However, the long-fanged Lion Zero's plan was probably going to fail, because a pair of light wings descended from the sky, waving out a sword light, and once again rushing towards the front of the tusked lion. The three Brewmans were cut in half. Boom! 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 Amidst the flames set off by the explosion, the long-fanged Lion Zero snorted again and complained, "So slow. Kai, you're late." It turned out that the long-fanged Lion Zero was suddenly blocked by the free Gouda driven by Ray Ming Kai. "Sorry, something happened on the way, and I was delayed." The complaint just now was just a casual remark from the Long Fong Line Zero, but did not expect Ray Mingkai to apologize to it so solemnly. In a new round of missile launches, the Long Fong Line Zero's problem followed. Kai, did you meet an enemy? I don't know, but it is indeed a strong enemy. That's what I felt. Recalling the sudden attack when they were about to arrive in Edmonton, Lei Mingkai had a feeling that something had gone beyond what he had expected. It was a light arrow that fell from the sky. A light arrow without any killing intent, but once it hit, it would be death. If Ray Mingkai's intuition was not sharp enough and was able to detect the light arrow that came out of nowhere, he would have fallen to the ground with the Free Gauda. Who was the one who launched the attack? Ray Mingkai did not know, because when the light arrow was avoided by the Free Gauda and directly bombarded the ground, the light arrow and the stone that was hit by it exploded into nothingness, leaving no trace of evidence that would allow Ray Mingkai to guess the identity of the person behind it. Under the clouds, the Free Gauda's radiance bearer system continued to increase its power, leaving afterimages in the clouds. At the same time, Ray Mingkai relied on the powerful speed given by the radiance bearer system to quickly search the clouds and the surrounding airspace. In the end, it was all in vain, as if the sudden light arrow just now was like an illusion in a dream. It seemed to exist, but it was just an illusion. However, on the snowfield, the deep pit that was blown up and the surrounding gravel and soil proved that the light arrow was not an illusion of Ray Mingkai. A warning. The light arrow caused Ray Mingkai to delay the time to support the Long Fong Line Zero, but it was not a reason for Ray Mingkai to withdraw from the battle. The black wave in front of him was getting closer and closer, and M.A. Hammonds, who was surrounded by a large number of Blue Man servants, had long been Ray Mingkai's enemy. Zero. Support me. Okay. Seeing the Free Gauda holding the high-frequency oscillation blade with both hands, the Long Fong Line Zero knew Ray Mingkai's plan. Therefore, the scene of the tusked lion type, Zero launching a sea of missiles was reproduced once again. Boom, boom. Under the attack of the Long Fong Line Zero, missiles continuously flew out from the launch compartment, dragging a long trail of flames behind them. They flew over the Free Gauda's head and directly landed in the middle of the Blue Man's servants that were blocking between the Free Gauda and M.A. Hammonds. In a flash, the sea of fire formed by the explosions engulfed all of the Blue Man's servants that were trying to block the Free Gauda's path, and blocked all of their actions to stop the Free Gauda's advance. M.A. Hammonds. Disaster Sacrificial Battle. The power of the high-frequency oscillation blade continued to increase, and under the suppression of the Long Fong Line Zero's firepower, only a few blue men managed to survive and were cut down by the blade. Boom! Boom! The suppression of the Long Fong Line Zero's firepower continued. A path to the Sea of Fire in Hammonds, Massachusetts, had long been formed. In the lens of this path, M.A. Hammonds was standing on top of the Sea of Fire, quietly staring at the Free Gauda, who was holding two swords. If M.A. Hammonds was a truly intelligent creature, would it mistake the Free Gauda with two swords for the leader of the demon god's body that ended the disaster sacrificial battle 300 years ago, Bailai? The moment this thought appeared, it was thrown to the back of Ray Mingkai's mind, because this was simply an unrealistic thought. The Free Gauda would not be Bailai. As for Bayeri, he would never become a free Gundam. Hammonds, let me see what you're capable of. The blade cut through the air, and at the same time split the flames between M.A. Hammonds and the Free Gauda. It went straight for M.A. Hammonds' head. It didn't matter how M.A. Hammonds had established a reputation that made humans tremble in fear. As long as the brain or the energy core was destroyed, the body that made humans tremble in fear would be nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. Bang! Ray Mingkai's idea was indeed correct. But M.A. Hammonds was not the kind of AI that would sit and wait for death. As the blade cut through the air, M.A. Hammond's strategy was to wave its tail blade and block the Free Gauda's blade. The collision between the sword blade and the tail blade caused a loud explosion. But it also meant that M.A. Hammond's tail blade was about to be cut apart by the Free Gao Da's high-frequency oscillation blade. During the disaster sacrificial battle, the tail blade that M.A. Hammond's was equipped with was the nightmare of human pilots. Countless human pilots have been killed by this mysterious tail blade. But today, 300 years later, this tail blade that had killed so many human elites was cut apart by the Free Gao Da's high-frequency oscillation blade. Boom! The moment the blade disappeared and the severed tail blade fell to the ground, M.A. Hammond's retreated at full speed, escaping from the attack range of the Free Gao Da's blade. At the same time, countless energy sparks burst out from M.A. Hammond's sharp beak. Kai, be careful! Beam cannon. It was M.A. Hammond's close-range beam cannon. The moment the Fong Lion-style zero alarm sounded, the Free Gao Da's light wings suddenly expanded, and he used all his strength to increase his speed to the limit. In just a few milliseconds, he escaped the attack of M.A. Hammond's beam cannon and rushed into the blue sky. Buzz, 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 buzz. The air was torn apart. The terrifying energy burst out with a thunderous roar and swept through the city. In an instant, countless high-rise buildings collapsed under the terrifying attack of the beam cannons. This was the first terrible scar left in the depths of the city since the start of the war. At the same time, it scared the people who were evacuating in an orderly manner. They scrambled to get on the buses, trains, and even planes to leave Edmonton as soon as possible. Calm down. Please stay calm. Please stay calm. Everyone, we are safe here. The battle has not reached here yet. Please stay calm. The staff members who were also frightened by the beam cannon just now kept yelling at the top of their lungs, loudly reminding the citizens to calm down. But in the end, it was useless. Representative, the situation is going out of control. The townsfolk were all shocked by the attack. AI, is M.A.'s army already here? The subordinate in charge of calming the people ran to Shi Miao's side, sweating profusely. He seemed to be asking for help, but more like he was expecting Shi Miao to promise something. But Shi Miao could not give an answer immediately. At this critical juncture, any speech could become a cause of loss of control. Especially at the moment, the entire evacuation point could only rely on the limited manpower of the garrison. As long as one or two AI airframes rushed in, it would inevitably cause a disaster. Please rest assured, the AI army led by M.A. Hammond's will not attack here. At this time, a familiar and reassuring voice sounded. Gedelia, who was standing beside Shi Miao, turned around and saw a group of people standing at the door. The group was led by Lakis and Olga from the Ironflower Regiment. Miss Lakis, Commander Olga, you are here. Gedelia's exclamation made Shi Miao heave a sigh of relief, and she nodded affirmatively. He understood that as long as Lakis could appear here, then His Excellency would not stand by and watch the city. Representative Shi Miao, congratulations on your election. In addition, please rest assured, Guy and State Zero are blocking M.A.'s army. The Ironflower Regiment will assist Edmonton to evacuate all the citizens. Without waiting for Shi Miao to speak, Lakis first congratulated, and then directly said the next arrangement. Then, thank you very much. But is the Ironflower Regiment not going to assist His Excellency Ray Ming-Kai? Even if Ray Ming-Kai is strong, I am afraid it will be difficult to fight the revived M.A. alone. Shi Miao's question made Lakis shake her head gently. No, enough. The power of Guy and State Zero is enough to buy enough time for Edmonton to evacuate. Now, let the Ironflower Regiment participate in the evacuation of the citizens. This result, for you and the Ironflower Regiment, is the best result, isn't it? Shi Miao pondered for a moment, then nodded. That's right. After all, Lars Horn is no longer the Lars Horn of the past. Chapter 730. The beam of light, which had left a terrible scar on Edmonton, faded away, and left the ground in a state of disarray. Kai, are you okay? The long-toothed lion raised his head and looked at the sky. No, I'm fine. Fortunately, the speed of the Radiance Bearer is fast enough. Based on the performance of the original Freedom Gundam, In that thrilling moment just now, it would have been difficult for it to escape from the beam cannon that was impossible to guard against. Who knew that this rigid AI program would come up with such a sinister attack? With the instant opportunity brought by the broken tail, it did not hesitate to launch the beam cannon at the free Gouda. It did not care if the chain reaction of the explosion would affect itself if it hit the free Gouda. No. Perhaps this is the horror of AI. As long as the mission is completed, it will not care about any losses, even if it will cause its own death in the completion of the mission. The dazzling light was eventually annihilated. Only MA, who raised its head to look at the intact Freedom Gundam, and Blue Man's army of servants gathered around it again. At this moment, it was as if they had returned to the moment when the two sides had just met. However, the situation was no longer the same as the scene at the beginning. First, it was the Long Fong Lion's astonishing heavy armor firepower. Then, it was the Freedom Gundam wielding two swords. It rushed in front of M.A. Hammonds like a gust of wind and almost cut him in half. Regardless of the lack of information in M.A. Hammond's database about the long-toothed lion and the existence of the free Gouda, now, the existence of the two has been raised by M.A. Hammonds to the list of the most threatening enemy targets. Therefore, the Blue Man army that was attacking everywhere was called back by M.A. Hammonds. Under its command, they carefully and cautiously surrounded the long-toothed lion. As for the free Gouda, M.A. Hammonds seemed to be unable to find any way to deal with it for a while. After all, in the era of the sacrificial war, the human side did not seem to have developed an MS with the ability to fly independently. The only ones that could occupy the air battlefield had always been the human side's reconnaissance aircraft that could not even withstand a beam cannon. This is not worth mentioning at all for the MA army. But now, because of the free Gouda's appearance, this unworthy opponent had become the weakness of the army led by Ma Hammonds. TSK. So what if you can fly? Seeing the Blue Man's servant army surrounding them again, the long-fanged lion opened its mouth, revealing its sharp golden teeth as if to threaten the Blue Man's servant army to stay away. However, that seemingly ferocious appearance was just a bored action of the long-toothed lion. That was right. It was boredom. The menacing Blue Man's servants could not even get close. They could not even attack the tusked lion. Why? The reason was that the Tusk Lion Style Zero had once again activated the power of the Lambda Drive system, enveloping himself in the bowl-shaped screen, allowing Blue Man's army to freely attack and collide with him. Even when he was in the mood, the long-toothed lion, State Zero, would lie on the ground, wagging its tail and pointing at the Blue Man's servants with great interest. This was undoubtedly a provocation. As for the effects of provoke, this was not known. Looking down from the sky, the surrounding Blue Man's servants were indeed all surrounding the long-toothed lion, putting on a posture of either you die or I live. Ray Minkai moved his gaze and looked at the position of Ma Hammonds. Good guy. In addition to the Blue Man's servants surrounding the long-toothed lion, the rest of the Blue Man's servants were gathered around him. Roughly counting, if there were not 100, there were at least dozens. Perhaps, including the Blue Man's servants on the long-toothed lion's side, this was already the Blue Man's servant army that Ma Hammonds could control. But even so, this was much more than when Ma Hammonds first appeared in the original work. The number of Blue Man's servants under his control was much more. Recalling the information that McGillis had told him before and combining it with the scene in front of him, Ray Minkai had already believed 70% to 80%. Buzz. While thinking, Ray Minkai's hands moved, and Gouda once again waved his blade, preparing to pounce. But unexpectedly, just as this action appeared, a beam of light suddenly burst out from Ma Hammonds' beak, piercing straight into the sky, heading straight for Gouda's position. With a flash of light, Gouda once again relied on the super high speed granted by the Radiant Bearer to easily escape from Ma Hammonds' surprise attack. Hey, you can't use the same trick twice. The previous surprise attack that was impossible to guard against did not hit Gouda, and this time, it was even more impossible to hit the prepared Gouda. In the blink of an eye, taking advantage of the fact that the beam of light piercing the sky had not dissipated and Ma Hammonds was still in the position of firing the beam cannon. Gouda had already pulled out a few afterimages in the air. After circling around the beam of light a few times, he waved his sword and rushed to the top of Ma Hammond's head. "Sorry, let me borrow your metal head." "Hammonds." A cold glint flashed. An incomparably sharp, high-frequency vibrating blade was swung by the Gundam, aiming straight for the steel head of the M.A. Hammonds. At this moment, Ma Hammonds had nowhere to run. Time only needed to move forward one more second, and this AI body that had once brought disaster to humanity would be cut down by Gao Da's sword, becoming the thick ink of Gao Da's many achievements. However, just as Gao Da's sword was about to break through Ma Hammond's armor, a chill erupted from Rei Minkai's heart without any warning, quickly occupying Rei Minkai's four limbs. At the same time, the fear from the depths of his soul followed closely behind, forcibly seizing control of Rei Minkai's body, and using all of his strength, the Radiant Bearer's speed exploded. Wong! In an instant, the sound of the Radiant Bearer's full power exploding filled the air, and a flash of light followed closely behind, brushing past the afterimage left behind by Gouda. It flew past the steel head of Ma Hammonds and directly blasted a deep crater under Ma Hammond's feet. Boom! The afterimage was blown away, and Ma Hammonds lost its balance, falling into the deep crater created by the explosion. However, it managed to escape from Gao Da's sword by the skin of its teeth. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust from the explosion, Gouda left behind afterimages as he rushed into the sky, gazing at the clouds in the distance. At this moment, Rei Minkai finally saw the culprit that had caused the fear in the depths of his heart to erupt, causing him to instinctively control Gao to escape. On the horizon, the dense black clouds were spreading. Amidst the dense black clouds, bolts of lightning were wantonly stretching out their terrifying bodies, causing the terrifying energy to erupt and set off rays of light to scatter in the world shrouded by the dense black clouds. And in this world filled with lightning and thunder, a pair of slowly unfurling black wings that exuded an oppressive and terrifying aura were holding up a steel giant that was at least 43 meters tall and clad in steel armor with obvious female features, proudly standing in the air. She was holding a half-drawn longbow in her hands, gazing at Gouda from afar. On the half-drawn longbow, a faintly discernible energy arrow quietly formed. It was not difficult to see that the arrow just now almost no. It should be said that the Freedom Gundam had already suffered the same attack a long time ago. The owner of the light arrow that delayed Gao Da's support of the Tusked Lion Zero was most likely this body that had suddenly appeared. The moment the doubts hovering in his heart were solved, Rei Minkai also recognized the origin of the body, even if the body's shape was different from the body that Rei Minkai was familiar with. For example, the pair of black wings should not be the terrifying color now, but a pure white. For example, the steel armor with obvious female characteristics should not be the dark armor that was burned by the dark flame, but more inclined to the cute white and pink steel armor. For example, the characteristics of the body that existed in Rei Minkai's memory were constantly overlapping with the body that stood under the clouds and brought him endless pressure. Rei Minkai silently said the name that belonged to it. Bao Angel. Yes. This was a body that did not exist in this world. Like the Freedom Gundam and the Tusked Lion Type Zero, this was a mech that came from outside this world. Moreover, its experience was even more resounding than the Freedom Gundam and the Longfong Lion. Lamia Labrise. If Rei Minkai remembered correctly, the pilot of this body was her, a mysterious pilot that came from the other side of the world. Her true identity was from the other side of the world, a spy from Shadow Mirror. However, this was only Rei Minkai's memory of Lamia Labrise's inherent identity. And now, ever since he met Invincible East in the Steel Polo world, Rei Minkai had some guesses about Lamia Labrise's identity. From Invincible East, after learning the reason why Lamia Labrise fell, Ray Minkai had always been guessing whether Lamia Labrise had become a member of the Destiny Council. Now it seemed very likely. Bow Angel? Looks like you want to protect this M.A. Hammonds. Both sides did not have any communication, but the meaning was already clear. That Bow Angel. No. Looking at the body that was completely different from the one in his memory, the body that was enveloped by the dark flame. Looking at the pair of black wings, Ray Minkai was more willing to call it the dark fallen angel. The blade cut through the air. The light wings bloomed. The Freedom Gundam once again left a series of afterimages in the sky. Some pulled upwards. Some fell rapidly. Some changed positions rapidly to the left and right. Some waved the blade, like thunder from the ninth heaven, and slashed towards the M.A. Hammonds that had just crawled out of the deep pit below. Suddenly, the sky above the M.A. Hammonds was filled with Freedom Gao Da's afterimages, making people dazzled. Facing this scene, the Bow Angel, dark fallen angel, standing under the dark thunderclouds, slowly raised the bow and pulled it to the fullest. The moment the bowstring was pulled to the fullest, the energy arrow that was faintly discernible shone brightly. It was like a dream. Phantom arrow. Inside the dark angel, a cold voice quietly sounded. In the blink of an eye, the radiance was fleeting. Only the longbow that still had traces of space distortion in the hands of the dark angel was left, and the distorted trajectory left behind when the dreamy radiance swept past. At this moment, it was as if an unknown bird's cry sounded between heaven and earth, making Ray Minkai feel cold and his limbs stiffen. Wong. At the juncture of life and death, Ray Minkai did not hesitate to control Freedom Gao to strike an unprecedented blow towards the bone-piercing cold that swept towards him. This was to get rid of that bone-piercing cold attack. It was also to let himself fight for a chance of survival from that extreme cold. Bang! Between heaven and earth, there was an ear-piercing sound of metal breaking. Also, the Freedom Gundam was sent flying by some kind of terrifying force. It crashed through several buildings before coming to a stop amidst the billowing dust. Cough, cough, cough. Bow Angel, you really live up to your reputation. In front of him was the constantly shaking screen, sometimes occupied by snowflakes, sometimes incomparably clear. Beside him was the control panel that was jumping with electric sparks. Although this attack did not kill Freedom Gao, it had already caused Freedom Gao to suffer the most serious injury since he participated in the battle. There was no need to check. There was no need to debug. Ray Minkai knew that the arrow not only shattered the pair of high-frequency vibration blades, but also caused Freedom Gao to lose at least 50% of its function. Now Freedom Gao could not even activate the radiance transmitter. Kai. On the other side, Freedom Gao, who did not expect that Freedom Gao would be sent flying by the Dark Angel, and whose function had been reduced to less than 50%, suddenly jumped up and wanted to support him. But unexpectedly, another arrow of light pierced through the air. Fortunately, this attack did not cause Freedom Gao's miserable state. Instead, the Lambda drive system screen that Freedom Gao used to taunt him became the key to resisting the arrow of light. State 0. Maintain the output of the Lambda drive system. Don't worry about me. The moment the brilliance emitted by the arrow of light disappeared on the Lambda drive system screen, Ray Minkai's voice also sounded on the communication channel. But freedom flashed in Freedom's eyes, and without looking back, he stepped on the densely packed Blue Man's servants and jumped onto the rooftop of a nearby building. Roar! As the lion roared, a glimmer of light appeared under his feet. So what if you can fly? In the next second, Freedom stepped on this glimmer of light and ran into the sky at an extremely fast speed, as if he was stepping on the ground, rushing towards the Dark Angel standing under the thunderclouds. Buzz! Staring at the ferocious lion that soared into the sky, the cold voice from the Dark Angel sounded again. A pure white lion? Then, can you take this sword of mine? A beam of light sword was pulled out from his left wrist and pointed directly at Freedom. Then, as the Dark Angel spread its black wings, The Dark Angel quickly fell and rushed in front of Freedom. Buzz! As the light sword was waved, there were several phantoms, stabbing Freedom's head, chest, front claws, and other vital points. Roar! Don't underestimate lions. In the face of such a dangerous attack, the long Fong lion roared, and two flashes of light condensed from its back in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the long Fong lion quickly waved in front of the long Fong lion, blocking the Dark Angel's attack with more slashes than the Dark Angel. Roar! Chance! The flash disappeared, revealing its true appearance and blocking the attack of the Dark Angel. The cannon on the chest of the long-toothed Lion Zero fired and bombarded the Dark Angel at a very close distance. Boom! 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 3 consecutive shots were fired in one breath, instantly drowning the Dark Angel. But at this moment, the long Fong Lion Zero suddenly jumped up and pulled away from the Dark Angel. It knew that relying on the power of the cannon alone, it was impossible to hurt the Dark Angel. Buzz! Sure enough, the flames set off by the cannon's close bombardment were torn apart by the sword, revealing the Dark Angel unscathed. Good job. Lion, you're great. _. Long Fong Lion Zero was stunned. It seemed that he could not react from the sudden change in tone of the cold voice. Boom! In the next second, the Dark Angel's figure suddenly disappeared in front of Freedom. When it reappeared, it was on top of Hammond's, who had lost its shoulders, only its head, body, and claws. It turned out that when Freedom Gowda was facing off against the Dark Angel, Freedom Gowda, who should have been on the verge of paralysis, used the cover of the thick smoke to finally activate the weapon that Ray Minkai had hidden, the sailfish railgun on Freedom Gowda's waist. Zila. The roar of the 2 railguns was cleverly covered by the sound of the battle between the tusked lion and the Dark Angel. It wasn't until Hammonds was unconscious that the Dark Angel disappeared in front of Freedom Gowda and grabbed Hammonds, and quickly left Edmonton under Freedom Gowda's and Freedom Gowda's gazes. Is it over? Freedom Gowda's was somewhat unsatisfied. It's over. Using a real body to fight a super body. I'm crazy. Looking at the Dark Angel quickly disappearing into the horizon, Ray Minkai couldn't help but sigh. Chapter 731. The fire that burned Edmonton had already been extinguished, but it was difficult for the citizens to return to the city in a short period of time. Even if the resurrected enemy of doom had been repelled by Gowda and the long-toothed lion, Abro's side was still unable to determine the location where the M.A. Hammond's army first appeared. In other words, the city that was attacked by the M.A. Hammond's army was likely to be attacked again. Under this uncertain risk, Abro's emergency team, which was quickly established with Sher Miao as the core, quickly listed Edmonton as an unapproachable place. Under any circumstances other than approved individuals and organizations, no one else was allowed to approach Edmonton. Of course, the revival of Hammonds had sent the entire Earth into a state of shock and panic. In addition to Abro, the rest of the economic circles not only took the initiative to contact Abro to try to obtain first-hand information about the M.A. Hammond's army from Abro, but also sent many people to the ancient battlefield hundreds of years ago to search, hoping to eliminate the possibility of the same risk in the shortest time possible. What's more, while sending people to search the ancient battlefield, they also sent an urgent inquiry to Lars Horn headquarters for necessary assistance. This was inevitable, just like the M.A. invasion in Edmonton. If it weren't for the fact that the Iron Flower Regiment and Gallahorn were fighting on the outskirts of Edmonton, the city would have been turned into ruins the moment the M.A. army invaded. Less than 1 in 10 citizens would survive. Sher Miao put down the document in her hand, picked up the pen, and signed her name at the end of the content, then slowly exhaled. Although the disaster was temporarily over, the cleanup work made the old man who returned to Abro feel a little overwhelmed. Take it down. Next, I should have half an hour of rest, right? Sher Miao handed the document to the attendant next to her and asked softly, Yes, all the documents have been processed. Well, that's good. Come with me to see the situation of His Excellency. Yes. In this disaster, the benefactor who allowed the citizens of Edmonton, including Shermiao, to successfully escape was now in a base 3 kilometers northeast of this temporary settlement. That was the base that Abro had specially allocated for the Iron Flower Regiment. Even though it was only a base that Lars Horn had once used and was abandoned due to funding issues. But for the Taiwan Regiment, it was a good place, especially the huge Naku, which was big enough to accommodate many. Ms. Shermiao wasn't the only one who wanted to go to the Taiwan Regiment's encampment. When Shermiao brought her men out of the temporary shelter, she discovered that Gudelia was already waiting for her. From the looks of it, they had been waiting for quite some time. Gudelia, let's go. As Gudelia boarded the vehicle, the motorcade, escorted by the mobile engineer team, sped towards the Iron Flower Regiment's base. In the base, Ray Minkai was standing in front of Gouda, fretting. There was no other reason. It was because at the end of the previous battle, the Black Bow Angel's attack dealt a very troublesome wound to Gouda. Just relying on the Radiant Bearer's nano repair machine to repair the damage, it was unlikely that it could be successfully repaired in a short period of time. Now, M.A. Hammond's retreat didn't mean that the rhythm of the revival of the adversity sacrifice was interrupted. The appearance of the pitch black bow angel undoubtedly meant that the next battle of sacrificial disaster would be even more terrifying and terrifying. Kai, I'm afraid this body can't be used for the time being. The snow-white male lion slowly walked to Ray Minkai's side and sized up the damaged Free Gouda with him. Even though the Freedom Gundam's twin swords had been destroyed and its main body had been smashed into several buildings before finally coming to a stop, the arrow had ended in a tragic outcome. But the damage to the Free Gouda had become an indisputable fact. Yes, let's not talk about the internal circuit and the various parts, but the outer armor can't be replaced. This is indeed a big problem. Originally, it was the easiest outer armor to replace, but became one of the problems to repair the Free Gouda. The PS armor owned by the Free Gouda was a new type of technology that had never been seen before in this world. To replace the PS armor for the Free Gouda in this world was simply wishful thinking. Looks like it's my turn to fight. The snow-white male lion raised its right front paw and waved it towards the Free Gouda, as if it wanted to take the baton from the Free Gouda, and looked at Ray Minkai. Kai, I've almost digested the energy of that big rock. For the next battle, I can fight. After a pause, the snow-white male lion's eyes lit up with a fighting spirit. Let's not talk about that big bird. If I meet that black body again, I won't be afraid. Dark and swarthy, huh? State 0. That body's name is the Bow Angel. Do you still remember Invincible East? Ray Minkai shook his head and tried to guide the snow-white male lion to remember the venerable one called Invincible East that they had met before. Invincible East? The snow-white male lion frowned slightly and suddenly remembered the figure that was still fresh in its memory. In that meeting, it was still in the form of a white cat. When it saw Dongfang Booby, it immediately sensed the terrifying power hidden in that aged body. However, with a light flick, the white cat's attack, which looked petite and cute, was actually not inferior to a full-powered attack from an MS, that old man who doesn't look like a human. Could it be that the black body has something to do with him? The snow-white male lion's gaze moved up and down the terrifying wounds on the Free Gouda's body. As long as the energy supply was sufficient, the PS armor that could ignore most of the live ammunition attacks was now riddled with scars and could no longer bear the load. No matter where it was torn apart by scars, leaving only the black-gray body that was covered with shocking scars. Maybe it is. At that time, I learned about the other fragment from Invincible East, and this fragment is very likely to be on that black body. No, it should be in the hands of the pilot of that body. The snow-white male lion turned around and looked at Ray Minkai in surprise. Why don't I remember that old man mentioning that black body again? It was no wonder that the white cat, State 0, was even more surprised. When he met Invincible East back then, Invincible East did not mention any information about the Bow Angel. It was more about the pilot of the Bow Angel, Lamia Labrise. State 0, who had never seen or heard of the Bow Angel, naturally did not know the key point. Because at that time, Invincible East did not mention anything about the body at all. He only mentioned Lamia Labrise. Lamia? Lamia Labrise? The snow-white male lion was stunned and recalled Invincible East's hateful and regretful expression when he mentioned the name Lamia Labrise. Yes, the person who piloted that black bow angel in front of us. I'm afraid it was her. Lamia Labrise. There are actually such twists and turns. Although it was somewhat hard to believe that there could be such a coincidence in this world, after being stunned, the snow-white male lion also accepted the fact in front of him. Then what should we do? Find a way to repair Frigauda? Or, the snow-white male lion's eyes were already filled with burning, fighting spirit. Frigauda can no longer be repaired in a short period of time, right? In Neku, which accommodated Frigauda, Raiminkai's lamenting sigh could be heard. Under the blue sky, above the boundless ocean, a helicopter quickly flew across the ocean and headed towards a certain coordinate in the depths of the ocean, slowly approaching the destination of this trip, Lars Horn's headquarters. We are back. Kalta. In the rear cabin of the helicopter, Galio looked at the woman sitting opposite him with a complicated expression. Ever since they met again, Galio felt that the woman was both familiar and unfamiliar. The familiar one was the woman named Kalta Ishio. The unfamiliar one was the woman named Kalta Ishio. I hope the elders can believe our words. Compared to Galio, who had a complicated expression, Kalta's gaze had been fixed on the battlefield, as well as Lars Horn's headquarters, which would affect the future direction. They will believe it. Father has already sent the conclusive news. Galio hurriedly said. He was in a hurry like a child who was asking for credit. Kalta slowly retracted her gaze from Lars Horn's headquarters in the distance and looked at the man sitting opposite her. Her smooth and delicate face, which was not covered with any rouge or other cosmetics that women liked, faintly glowed. Galio, you and I both know that relying on the power of the Bardawin family alone is not enough to resist the invasion of the ancient enemy that revived from the Calamity Sacrificial War. Now, it is no longer the Calamity Sacrificial War era of 300 years ago, when humanity was at a critical moment of life and death. Kalta's words made Galio pause. Yes, he understood. Although Lars Horn still had the mission of protecting humanity, eliminating all battles, and preventing human society from being destroyed by war, in fact, not many people would face and carry out this mission. Even if there were, they would just pull up this almost forgotten flag to obtain the benefits they wanted. Therefore, Galio was silent. It wasn't until the helicopter landed on the helipad of Lars Horn's headquarters that the silence was dispelled when the two saw the familiar figure. Welcome back, my dear friends. Against the strong wind caused by the landing of the helicopter, the tall blonde man stood motionless in the same place, waiting for Galio and Kalta to appear. McKillis, are you hurt? Sorry, I let you face that terrifying opponent alone. When Galio saw that McKillis didn't seem to be injured at all, he didn't wait for the helicopter to stop and directly jumped down and ran to McKillis. Galio, although I am happy to meet you, you should at least pay attention to your safety. This doesn't suit your identity as the heir of the Bardawin family, one of the 7-star families. To Galio's surprise, not only did Kalta's appearance change, but even McKillis seemed to have become a little unfamiliar to him. Agent Major McGillis? Galio frowned slightly. McKillis. Long time no see. It seems that something happened here that I don't know about. Kalta, who walked down from the helicopter, was much calmer. She only glanced at McGillis and nodded faintly, which was considered a greeting to McGillis. There was no obvious emotional fluctuation like when she interacted with McGillis before. This time, it was McGillis who was surprised, but he didn't care. McGillis just smiled faintly. It seems that the accident this time has caused some changes in you. All in all, it is a good thing, isn't it, Kalta? Maybe it is. Kalta didn't want to continue McGillis' words. She shifted her gaze and looked around at the situation around her. Then, she noticed a hint of something. Special Agent McGillis, Major. What happened here? There are too few people. McGillis chuckled softly at Calta's question. It's nothing special. It's just that the headquarters is making the final conclusion. Final conclusion? Is it about the resurrection of the Doom ritual? Galio asked as he came back to his senses. Yes and no. McGillis' smile became more mysterious, but he didn't keep it mysterious. Or rather, he had been waiting for Galio and Calta to ask about Lars Horn's strange behavior. Galio, Calta, the resurrection of the Doom ritual this time isn't an ancient enemy that has been asleep for hundreds of years. It is man-made. What? The two exclaimed in unison, as if they couldn't accept McGillis' words. This was once an unbelievable conclusion for me, but it is the truth. Now, the leaders of the Seven Stars family that controls Lars Horn have gathered in the meeting hall to judge the sinner that caused the resurrection of the ancient enemy of Doom ritual. McGillis' surprise came one after another, catching Galio and Calta off guard. Wait, Agent McGillis, Major. Now, the culprit that caused the resurrection of the enemy of Doom ritual has been caught. Calta finally couldn't keep her calm and quickly asked, Yes, Calta issue. Speaking of which, the culprit is also related to you. McGillis paused for a moment, then continued. Of course, the culprit is also related to me, because the culprit is my father and also your guardian, is Nerio Farid. Chapter 732. Is Nerio Farid. Do you know your crime? A stern voice of reproach reverberated in the spacious meeting hall. Amidst this voice, the insignia of the Seven-Star families swayed slightly, as if responding to the stern voice that reverberated in the meeting hall. Beneath the flags, apart from the empty seat beneath the golden wolf flag that represented the Farid family, the other 6 flags were filled with the 6 leaders of the Seven-Star families. They had gathered here for no other reason. It was all for the sake of investigating whether or not the sudden revival of disaster sacrifice was caused by someone else. Moreover, the person who had caused all this to happen was the head of one of the Seven Stars families, the Farid family, is Nerio Farid. In the hundreds of years since the end of the Calamity Sacrifice, the Seven Star families have been fighting openly and covertly over the authority of Lars Horn and the Seven Star families. However, none of this needed to be said. No matter who it was, they had all wisely set a bottom line that everyone tacitly understood. Now, this boundary seemed to have been breached. However, the culprit who caused all of this turned a blind eye to the pressure from the 6 lords. He stood there calmly, looking at the 6 lords led by Duke Bakurin. So what if it is? So what if it isn't? Duke Bakurin, does all of this surprise you and everyone else? Nerio Farid revealed a faint smile, completely unconcerned about the situation he was in. If it really was you who caused the revival of the Calamity Sacrifice, then you are the sinner of the Seven Star families, Lars Horn, and even humanity. As the leader of the Farid family, one of the Seven Star families, the descendant of the hero who ended the Calamity Sacrifice, you actually committed such a heinous crime. Duke Bakurin's voice rumbled like thunder in the meeting hall. That voice was so loud that it hurt one's ears. It was hard to believe that Duke Bakurin was an old man with white hair. Crime? Duke Bakurin, I don't think this is a crime. A wise man submits to circumstances. The times have changed. Duke Bagulin, as well as the leaders of the Seven Stars clans. Nerio Farid chuckled softly. He was not afraid of Duke Bakurin's reproach, nor was he afraid of the blame he would receive if he admitted that he was the culprit behind the revival of the ritual. Lord Farid, are you admitting that you are the culprit behind the revival of Doom sacrifice? Seated to the right of Duke Bakurin was a middle-aged man with a large beard. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes as he stared intently at Nerio Farid. Didn't I tell you? So what if he was? So what if he wasn't? Prince Arion, you, who I've always regarded as my opponent, won't still persist in such a boring topic? Nerio Farid sneered as he faced his greatest opponent, Lestar Elian. At this moment, Nerio Farid's performance finally made the 6 leaders of the Seven Star clans realize the truth. Everyone, It seems that our Seven Stars clans have become fewer in number. Duke Zongong of Backer Orchid had a dark expression on his face as he slowly said these words. Wait, Duke Bogulin, Isnario Farid's actions are personal and have nothing to do with McKillis Farid. Moreover, we were able to discover Isnario Farid's crimes thanks to McKillis Farid's righteous actions. As soon as he heard Duke Bogulin's suggestion to revoke the Farid family's honor, family head Badwin was the first to speak up. McKillis, is it? Fine. Then, Duke Bogulin frowned. Duke Bakurin frowned, but before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Isnario Farid's sudden laughter. Ha 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 ha! Ridiculous! Utterly ridiculous! I thought that I would see something different happen when I walked right into the trap. But the result is still the same. Lars Horn is already dead. No matter what happens in the outside world, Lars Horn will still follow in his rotten footsteps. How ridiculous! Isnario Farid, what nonsense are you spouting? Since you've already confessed, you should obediently accept your trial. The youth who had just taken over the Kuzan family as the head of the Seven Stars family, Iagu Kazan, finally couldn't hold himself back any longer. He pointed at Isnario Farid and cursed. However, ordinary people might fear Kazan's name, but Isnario Farid was not intimidated by Iagu Kazan, who was still young and immature, and who still had the indiscriminate attitude of a young man who was obsessed with what he believed to be the right thing to do. Oomph. Since when is it the turn of a dog who only knows how to wag its tail at Arion to bark here? You, Isnario Farid, you dare to insult the name of Kuzan. As expected, Isnario Farid only needed to provoke the young Kazan a little, and he immediately flew into a rage. He wanted to jump down and teach this sinner a lesson. Calm down, Iagu. Fortunately, Lestar Arion, who was sitting next to him, stopped him. Iagu, it's not your turn to speak. Isn't that right? Isnario. The first half of Lester's sentence was to appease Iagu, but the second half was directed at someone behind Isnario. Oomph, my good son, so it was you who leaked it? Isnario snorted coldly. He didn't even turn his head. He knew that the person who had leaked his secret had already arrived at the conference hall. Yes, Brigadier General Farid. As a soldier of Lars Horn, it is his duty to protect the citizens. Brigadier General Farid's actions are undoubtedly trampling on Lars Horn's mission and the glory of the Seven Stars family. Matt Gillis's determined voice came from behind Isnario Farid, echoing in the air above the assembly hall. In order to prevent Brigadier General Farid's crimes from worsening, and in order to make my beloved father turn back, I don't hesitate to cast a shadow over Farid's name to prevent my father from continuing down the wrong path. Hearing McGillis' words, the cold smile on Isnario's lips deepened, and his demonic charm grew. That sounds very much like it. Farid's son, but can you really hold on to Farid's name? McGillis, my beloved little lamb. Boom! Just as Isnario finished speaking, a thunderous boom suddenly assaulted the conference hall. The moment the rumbling roar reverberated above the assembly hall, a large piece of the ceiling wreckage smashed down without warning. Amidst the billowing dust, the broken pieces of the ceiling smashed down the 7 flags in the meeting hall and even enveloped the leaders of the 6 Seven Stars clans. Lord Arion. In the midst of the sudden accident, Iagu reacted immediately and subconsciously pounced on Arion, who was beside him. Father! Dodge! On the other side, Galio, who had come with McGillis but hadn't said anything, also rushed to the flag and threw Bardowin to the ground to protect him. Apart from that, the other 3 leaders were either rolling on the ground or watching the ceiling debris come crashing down, plunging them into endless darkness. Duke Bakurin. Kalta was half a step too slow and was about to take a step forward when McGillis pulled him back. Kalta, don't go. It's too late. McGillis glanced at the flag that had already fallen and then looked at the place covered in dust. Isnario Farid wasn't covered by the debris of the ceiling. Crack! At this moment, a soft sound came from the broken ceiling. It was a long mechanical arm. The mechanical arm extended down from the hole in the ceiling and reached Isnario Fard's position. Not good. Isnario is about to escape. McGillis' gaze flickered as he subconsciously took out a pistol from his waist and raised it to shoot. Ha ha, McGillis. If you want to shoot, go ahead. Now, the name of Fard will belong to you. But as he watched the man being grabbed by the mechanical arm and brought to the ceiling, McGillis didn't shoot. He only silently watched as he left, until Iagu Kazan screamed, "No, Lord Arian, wake up." Not good. Duke Bakurin. As soon as he heard Iagu Kazan scream, Kalta ignored the still tumbling sand and the danger of the debris of the ceiling that could fall again at any time. He rushed over to Iagu Kazan. Then, Kalta's panic-filled voice came. "McGillis, Galio, come over quickly. Duke Bakurin is dead." Perhaps no one in Lars Horn had expected such a dramatic turn of events. The speed of the change was beyond the common sense of most people. Firstly, Isnario Fard, the leader of the Fard family, one of the seven-star families that ended the War of Calamity, was actually the main culprit behind the revival of modern Calamity sacrifice. Secondly, as Fard's successor, McGillis Fard placed righteousness before family and took the initiative to expose Isnario Fard's scheme to Lars Horn's headquarters. In the end, when the leaders of the seven-star families who controlled Gjallarhorn tried to interrogate Isnario Fard, their scheme was exposed, and the enraged Isnario Fard decided to kill him. He killed the oldest member of the seven-star families, Duke Bagulanzan, and injured Lestar Elian and Duke Falk Fard. Only Iagu Kazan, who had just taken over Kazan's authority, and the surviving Badwin and his son, Cardiet Hugh, who had been rescued, and McGillis Fard, who had placed righteousness before family, were left to clean up the mess. Even though Duke Bakurin, who had reacted, immediately sealed the news. However, the glaring hole in the roof of Gjallarhorn's headquarters was undeniable proof. Coupled with the mysterious body that had appeared out of nowhere and taken Isnario Fard away, the rumors of the leaders of the Seven Stars families being attacked soon spread throughout Earth. "This is troublesome. Galio McGillis. I didn't expect the situation to turn out like this. Now, the entire headquarters is lacking in manpower, and even the people are starting to feel uneasy." Duke Bakurin, who couldn't wash away the fear he felt after almost stepping into Duke Bakurin's shoes, let out a long sigh. In front of him stood the son and future son-in-law that he was most satisfied with. "Father, could it be that even you can't calm everyone?" Galio hesitated for a moment before asking. Duke Bakurin shook his head and sighed. "The other families are still fine, but it's hard for me to speak to the Fard family and the Bakurin family. McGillis, you know the reason." Now, Duke Bakurin pointed the spearhead at the silent McGillis. Even Galio knew that Duke Bakurin was forcing McGillis to make a decision. Either use this opportunity to seize Fard's name, or completely cut ties with Fard and become a member of the Bakurin family. Choose. Actually, McGillis had already made his choice. He wanted both. "I understand. Father, now I'll go and calm the Fard family and give the Bakurin family justice in Fard's name." Looking at McGillis's unwavering back, Duke Bakurin suddenly felt as if he couldn't see through the son-in-law he had personally chosen. His ambition, it seemed to be very big, so big that he couldn't see it clearly. "Galio, help me send a message to Kalta issue. The most important thing now is to integrate the Earth's outer orbit command fleet as soon as possible. Isnario Fard will probably launch another attack very soon." "Yes, Father." Galio paused, somewhat hesitant. "Galio, is there anything else?" "Yes. Before coming here, McGillis mentioned to me that Iagu Kazan's side seems to be a little unstable." "Iagu Kazan?" At the mention of this overly young Duke Kazan, Duke Bakurin's head hurt even more, but there was nothing he could do. "Forget it. Let him be. Right now, our mission is to stabilize the situation as soon as possible. As for Duke Kazan, let's see what he chooses." Galio opened his mouth, but in the end, he remained silent. His father's reaction was just as McGillis had said to him in private. Right now, among Lars Horn, there was probably no one who could control Iagu Kazan. The one who could control this mad dog, Lestar Elian, was unfortunately injured and unconscious. He was lying in the hospital, and it was unknown when he would wake up. In other words, in the current situation, apart from his Nereo, the biggest variable was Iago Kazan, this dog who might become even crazier because of his master's injury. Chapter 733. He was all alone. Now, McGillis was facing the censure of the Baguranzan family by himself. There was no other reason. It was because of his Nereo Farid's sudden attack, which led to the death of Duke Baguranzan, the oldest man in the family along with Larshorn. For decades, Duke Baguranzan had brought unparalleled glory and wealth to the family. But with the death of Duke Baguranzan, the family fell into a fearful countdown. As a member of a 7-star family, even a hedonistic son of a rich family who was waiting to die knew that when the family leader died, the family would fall into turmoil. From that moment on, whether it was the family itself or the other 7-star families, they would all have thoughts about the family that had lost their family leader. Therefore, in order to protect themselves and to gain more benefits, McGillis, the son of his Nereo Farid, naturally became their target. From the moment McGillis appeared at the gate of the Baguranzan family, McGillis was caught in the censure of the Baguranzan family and could not escape at all. Moreover, McGillis' expression remained gentle and calm in the face of the increasingly unpleasant words. It must be known that among the people who were censuring McGillis, there were also many girls who had clearly expressed their admiration and even love for him not long ago. There was an endless stream of censors, wave after wave. It was as if from the moment McGillis appeared, the news of him entering the Baguranzan family alone had spread all over the world, attracting all of the Baguranzan family members who knew of Duke Baguranzan's death. From morning to noon, from noon to evening, from evening to late at night, the crowd that was censuring McGillis had changed several times. But as the central figure of the censure storm, McGillis did not eat a single drop of water, nor did he eat a single grain of rice. From beginning to end, he maintained a gentle and sincere smile as he faced the crowd that was censuring him. This scene made the other 7-star families who had heard the news exclaim in surprise. "Damn it, Kalta, why did you stop me? Those bastards are just venting their anger. McGillis is not the murderer." As one of the people who had heard the news, Galio wanted to rush up and help McGillis the moment he saw him being surrounded. But Kalta pulled him back. "Galio, let that man go. Right now, he is walking on the path he is pursuing." Kalta's gaze surprised Galio. He remembered that Kalta loved McGillis. How did he become so unfamiliar? Seeing McGillis being scolded by the Baguranzan family, Kalta was actually able to remain calm and say let him be. "How so, Galio?" Kalta turned around and looked at Galio. He found that Galio's eyes seemed to have a trace of unfamiliarity. Kalta, issue. Are you really Kalta yet, Hugh?" Galio could not believe that Kalta would view McGillis's predicament as a stranger. "Yes, I'm Kalta issue. The real Kalta issue. Galio." The old Kalta issue had died the moment he was captured. The current Kalta Yethu is just a pitiful person who understands reality. Kalta whispered something that Galio could not understand before he turned and left. He did not have the slightest intention to stay here, nor did he have the intention to stay and help McGillis. That clean and neat figure made Galio feel more and more unfamiliar. "This is the end. Have you guys had enough? Duke Farid is only here to tell our respected Duke Baguranzan his last words. What are you guys doing? Get out of the way. Let Duke Farid in." Finally, when the full moon hung high in the sky, the person who had a certain amount of authority in the Baguranzan family's main residence could no longer sit still. Seeing the crowd surrounding him fall silent and slowly retreat to make way for him, McGillis knew that he had taken the first step. The first step towards that step? "Bailai Gouda, are you waiting for me now?" The news of Larshorn's headquarters being attacked spread like the wind across the world, especially when the members of the 7-star family scattered all over the world left their residences and gathered at Jia Larshorn's headquarters It confirmed that Jia Lars Horn's headquarters was attacked by an unknown force. When this news spread out, it shocked and terrified all the major economic circles in the world. First, it was the revival of disaster sacrifice. Then it was the attack on Lars Horn's headquarters. Even if the major economic circles did not know the details of the attack on Lars Horn's headquarters, they could still guess the general outcome. The basis was the seven-star family's members who were constantly leaving their residences and returning to Lars Horn's headquarters. Who would have thought there would be a day when Lars Horn's headquarters would be attacked? Since I was born, Lars Horn's headquarters was like the most powerful castle in human history. It could not fall. Holding the photos from the intelligence channel, Shermiao could not help but sigh. Representative Shermiao, what happened? Olga, who was summoned by Shermiao, was confused. Did something happen to the members of the seven-star families? Even without looking at the photos, Ray Minkai, who had arrived earlier than Olga, could tell from Shermiao's expression that something was amiss. Yes, although the news has not been confirmed, from the information from the other economic circles, especially the main residences of the Baguranzan family, it is very likely that something happened to the oldest member of Lars Horn's headquarters. The oldest member? With Shermiao's sigh and the information that McGillis had divulged, Ray Minkai seemed to have a rough idea of what had happened. However, he didn't expect that his Nerio Fard would dare to return to Gallahorn's headquarters and do such a thing even though his plot had been exposed by McGillis. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Ray Minkai's mind. No, Isnario Farid did not return to Lars Horn's headquarters with a fluke mentality and an attempt to deceive everyone. He did it knowing full well. He probably beat Lars Horn at his own game and caused internal strife in Lars Horn's headquarters in one fell swoop. Thinking of this, Ray Minkai looked at Shermiao and discovered that she seemed to be thinking the same thing. Your Excellency, Ray Minkai, what do you think we should do next? Should we ask for help? Or, Shermiao did not finish the latter half of her sentence. However, Lei Minkai already knew what Shermiao meant. As an economic circle that had entrusted the military and violent organizations to Lars Horn's headquarters for 300 years, perhaps it was time for them to have enough power to defend themselves. No, Representative Shermiao, ask for help. Even if we rely on ourselves, it is not something that can be done in a day. Moreover, we do not know when adversity ritual will appear again. Shermiao muttered to herself for a moment, glanced at Olga and the others who were looking at the photo, and slowly nodded. Your Excellency is right, but I think that while we ask for help, we can also achieve a certain degree of self-reliance in a short period of time. Ray Minkai also understood what Shermiao meant, but he was not suitable for it and did not want to take the initiative to speak. Commander Olga, until today, the Iron Flower Regiment's commission can be considered completed. But I believe that Commander Olga also knows that the current situation has already caused our Abro to be in a terrible fix. So, before the remuneration is calculated, I wonder if Commander Olga is willing to accept a new commission. Seeing that Ray Minkai did not take the initiative to reveal her thoughts, Shermiao simply spoke her mind. No, we are aware of the current situation. In terms of remuneration, Miss Gudelia has already given us an answer. There is no need. Olga, who subconsciously replied to Shermiao, suddenly froze and belatedly cried out in surprise. New commission. Looking at Olga's surprised expression, Shermiao nodded in satisfaction. Yes, new commission. Perhaps the Olga in front of her was more in line with Shermiao's general impression of a young man, but a certain silent guy was too calm. Wait. I wonder if the new commission is for the Iron Flower Regiment to be on guard against the possibility of another doom ritual for Abro. After being surprised, Olga quickly understood what Shermiao meant. And, thinking this way, Olga also understood the meaning behind the photo. Now that Lars Horn's headquarters was attacked, Abro might be the first to have his own power. Olga looked at Ray Minkai and found that Ray Minkai gave him a look that said, "Do as you see fit." Seeing this, Olga was silent for a moment and then nodded. I understand what Shermiao means, and the Iron Flower Regiment has no intention of rejecting Not to mention, even if the Ironflower Regiment leaves Earth now, after the revival of the Doom ritual, they will not be able to remain unscathed. No matter if it is Lars Horn or the ancient Doom ritual, they will probably spread the flames of war to Mars. That is indeed a possibility. Then, Regiment Commander Olga, do you agree to help defend Abro and train a new national defense force for Abro? Yes. Sure, meow. The Ironflower Regiment agrees. Regardless of the process, the Ironflower Regiment still embarked on the path of cooperation with Abro. This result was not bad for Mecha, the extreme north of the world. In a vast wilderness covered by snow, a huge and vast underground space was shrouded in bright light. Under the bright light, black blue men were dragging pieces of armor out of the warehouse. They lined up in an orderly formation and entered the center of the vast underground space. They neatly placed the armor in a specially designated equipment storage area. Next to the equipment storage area, there was a M.A. Hammonds that lost both arms and only had a sharp steel head and body left. From the outside, the heavily injured M.A. Hammonds was motionless, as if it was a creature that had fallen into a coma due to severe injuries. But in reality, its AI program was instructing the black Bloomin' servants that filled this underground space to prepare the materials needed to repair its body. In the previous battle, it had encountered the most terrifying weapon in its database. The taboo weapon created by humans hundreds of years ago. One after another, H.A. Hammond started up the countermeasures one after another. It wanted to use this time to find a way to deal with the so-called taboo weapon. At the same time, above this vast space, there was a balcony suspended in midair. In the middle of the balcony, a beautiful figure was standing there, overlooking the M.A. Hammonds repair work. Strangely, the M.A. Hammonds and its Blue Men army, which regarded humans as enemies and vowed to exterminate humans, turned a blind eye to this beautiful figure. M.A. Hammonds. A cold voice slowly sounded. The M.A. Hammonds that was silently running the calculation program raised its head and looked at the beautiful figure. Calculate according to the program I provided you. That kind of weapon is not worthy of your attention. His amber pupils flickered with a light of extreme rationality, and that cold voice had become Ma Hammond's guidance at this moment. Wong. As soon as his voice fell, a low and deep voice reverberated from Hammond's body. Its calculations on the so-called taboo weapon were immediately canceled and replaced with a mysterious program given to it by the beautiful figure. Seeing Ma Hammond's fall silent again, the beautiful figure slowly nodded her head, as if she was very satisfied with Ma Hammond's performance. If you're here, then come out. This is not your Lars Horn headquarters. Immediately after, when the beautiful figure spoke again, another figure appeared at the balcony's entrance. It was a middle-aged man. He was wearing Lars Horn's Brigadier General uniform, and holding a cane, he walked step by step until he was 3 meters behind the beautiful figure. He placed his right hand on his chest and respectfully bowed to the beautiful figure. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry to disturb your mood. Esteemed Ms. Lamia Labrise. Disturb? You little bug didn't disturb me. The cold voice had just spoken, but it suddenly became arrogant and aloof. But the words that were close to an insult did not make the middle-aged man angry, because he knew that the sudden change in tone was only a small problem of the esteemed lady in front of him. Right? This is just a small problem that can't reach the apex. Madam, I've already followed the plan and caused a disturbance in Lars Horn. But I'm afraid this won't last long. Whether it's Lestar Arian or my good son, they won't let Lars Horn continue like this. Restal Arion? That man? It doesn't matter. The beautiful figure known as Lamia Labrise smiled coldly. No matter how much it struggles, this world cannot escape from the hands of the council. Don't you think so? Isnario Farid. Yes, esteemed madam. Chapter 734. Lars Horn Headquarters. Unknown to the world, a mysterious place that only existed in the mouths of a few people. The secret hidden deep in a spacious underground space of Lars Horn Headquarters was finally going to be revealed. Standing in front of the gate that isolated the secret hidden by Gallahorn hundreds of years ago from the world, McGillis suddenly felt that all the efforts he had made, the price he had paid, and even the humiliation he had suffered had been fulfilled in an instant. "Is this enough?" A voice with a hint of mockery sounded from behind McGillis. McGillis understood the meaning of the words, but he did not get angry because of it. Instead, he withdrew his gaze from the door and turned his head slightly to look at the man who appeared beside him without him knowing. No, human desire can never be satisfied. After all, to satisfy one's own desire, one must pay a corresponding price. McGillis smiled, then stepped forward, raised his hand, and pressed on the steel door that had been isolated for a long time. The current me just happens to have the qualifications to realize the true meaning I pursue. Qualifications? The person raised his eyebrows and laughed a few times before replying with a meaningful tone. That's right. That is indeed a kind of qualification. No one would have thought that in order to have this qualification, there would be someone who dared to gamble with their own safety. A bet? Perhaps so. But I won't forget. The person who can let me have this qualification is you, Mr. K. Mr. Lou Lucio v. Britannia. That was just responding to Mr. McGillis' thoughts. I didn't do anything that would make McGillis remember. The person who came was Lou Lucio. Moreover, from the fact that there was no one else other than McGillis and Lou Lucio, McGillis already trusted Lou Lucio a lot. For McGillis, who had personally killed his childhood sweethearts and best friends, Calta and Galio, in the original work, this was simply unimaginable. Moreover, from the conversation between the two, McGillis' past seemed to have been learned by Lou Lucio, and the person himself did not show any resistance to this, nor did he show any signs of anger out of embarrassment. It's about time. Duke Farid. If this continues, the doom ritual will appear first. Lou Lucio raised his hand, glanced at his wristwatch, and reminded him. McGillis slowly nodded. You're right. It's time to awaken the true meaning that has been sleeping for a long time. Rumble. The steel door that had been isolated for hundreds of years slowly opened with a heavy rumble. The existence that had been sleeping for hundreds of years, the symbol of the supreme power in McGillis' heart, also appeared in front of his eyes. Looking at the silent steel giant, McGillis could not help but reveal a trace of fanaticism and yearning. How long? How long? How long? Wandering in the alleys that no one cared about, struggling to survive in that gorgeous building that was filled with evil, struggling to survive in those beautiful surroundings, unaffected by the noise of the world, and only to please one person. Furthermore, he struggled to survive as the successor of Farid in the territory that was crowned as a 7 Stars family. Since that moment when he was weak, helpless, and humiliated, he had become the most powerful man in the world. McGillis understood one thing. He needed power. He needed to change everything. No, he needed the power to completely reverse his fate. On a certain helpless and tormented night, he saw a glimmer of hope. In the book called The Biography of Aginica Caro, he saw a glimmer of hope for what he believed to be the supreme power. Now, the symbol of power, strength, power, vitality, influence, and even violence, which is claimed by the book to contain the world's power, strength, might's strength, vitality, influence, and even violence, was right before his eyes. The rumble of the door opening slowly stopped. But McGillis still did not take that step. This made Lou Lucio, who was standing beside him and assisting McGillis, feel a little surprised. From their contact during this period of time, McGillis' desire for Gaudebeiri could be said to be a microcosm of his life. In order to achieve this goal, he would not hesitate to sell everything that he could. Such an extreme man, at the moment when he was about to achieve his lifelong wish, he stopped. In the silence, McGillis looked at Gaudebeiri with a slight fluctuation in his eyes. Then, he raised his hand and unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the cold device that was installed on his spine at an unknown time. Alea consciousness system. McGillis actually took the risk to install this device that could only be installed by teenagers in the growth stage without anyone's knowledge. Your Excellency Lu Lucio, when you go back, please help me pass a message to my fiancée, Amelia. This mission might take some time. But rest assured, my sister, Nanami, has been getting along very well with Miss Amelia recently. I believe that in a short time, she won't feel lonely. That is, as long as Duke Farid can resolve everything before then. McGillis casually tossed the clothes he took off to the side and nodded slowly. In that case, I'll leave it to your Excellency Lu Lucio. Agunica, Kairu, Gaudabayari. After hundreds of years of sleep, it was time to wake up. Just like the old enemy it had at the beginning of its life. The far north. Even the boundless white snow couldn't cover the black waves that appeared again. The cold red light flashing in the black waves was the light emitted by the cold electronic eyes of the small MA called Blumen when it moved at high speed. Looking from afar, it was a scene that made people tremble with fear on the rolling black waves. TCH. Sure enough, it appeared again. These bastards, at the edge of the far north, in a frontier post built by Abro, Sino, who was ordered to rotate the surveillance mission, put down his binoculars, cursed, and then picked up the communicator beside him. This is Frontier Number 1. Did the headquarters receive? After a few seconds of silence, Olga's voice came from the other end of the communicator. This is the headquarters. Sino, what's the situation on your side? Very bad. The number has increased a lot compared to a few days ago. It's just a world of ice and snow. Where did these bastards find the resources? Including Sino, all the people involved in the frontier surveillance mission had been highlighted by Ray Minkai. In addition to not challenging the MA army alone, it was not to be afraid of the sudden increase in the number of MA army. To this end, Ray Minkai stuffed a thick stack of information to Sino and asked them to read the information about M.A. Hammonds. Although the stack of information was very thick, Sino, who barely managed to finish reading it, was still able to calmly observe the increasing number of M.A. troops. He did not follow Abro's example, who had just learned the basic operation of the mobile engineers and rushed up to show off, only to be drowned by Blumen's army in the end. He was ignorant and fearless. Hey, Head, how long are we going to monitor? Although we can still stay calm, I'm afraid that the other side can't help it. In the face of the growing MA army, Abro, who was defeated in Edmonton, finally couldn't sit still. The original plan was to let the rookies who had undergone a certain amount of training to assist the Iron Blood Regiment in the frontier position. Otherwise, after the reckless and hot-blooded rookie pilots were surrounded and killed by the Blumen army a few days ago, those who were Abro's frontline commanders not only did not punish the relevant personnel, but also secretly encouraged other rookies who were frightened by the MA army. This approach, Sino saw in his eyes and sighed in his heart. If the Blumen army could be killed by the rookies who were casually encouraged, the war of sacrifice would not have happened. Sino, wait, we have a plan here. Just wait for the right time. Olga's words made Sino shrug his shoulders. He didn't know when Olga's timing was. Roger. Then, let's wait here. The communication from the forward surveillance position ended. But Olga's heart could not calm down. Are you afraid? Olga. At this time, Raymond Kai's voice sounded. No, I'm not afraid. I'm just wondering when this calamity, sacrificial battle will end. Olga shook her head and said with a sigh, in the past few days, I've found information related to the war of sacrifice 300 years ago from the representative of Shermau. But I can't find a way to solve the current war of sacrifice from the past. Olga's eagerness to learn surprised Ray Minkai. Ray Minkai laughed out loud, praising Olga a little. I didn't expect Commander Olga to be so eager to learn. Well, it would be a good idea to look for similar cases and solutions from the past. But even if you can't find it, you don't have to be discouraged. After a pause, Lei Minkai gave Olga some time to recover from his previous words. Then he continued, That's right. History is history. It can only provide us with a reference for the development of things, but it can't solve the current problem by making us copy books. Not to mention, this war of sacrifice is not without a way to solve it in a short period of time. Carefully listening to Ray Minkai's words, Olga suddenly had an idea and caught the key point. Your Excellency, you're saying there's a way to solve this war of sacrifice? Yes, there is. But it's going to be very difficult. Since the battle with the Black Bow Angel, Ray Minkai has listed the Black Bow Angel as his first goal. Even though M.A. Hammonds is regarded as a natural enemy by the humans of this world, Ray Minkai knows that the existence of the Black Bow Angel is more terrifying than M.A. Hammonds. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the flickering black flames around the Bow Angel's body alone would be enough to instantly engulf Edmonton in a sea of fire and consign it to eternal damnation if it went out of control. Such a terrifying existence must be solved as soon as possible. At the same time, the key to solving this war of sacrifice is very likely to be on the Black Bow Angel. Olga, continue to monitor the movements of M.A.'s army. If there are any changes, inform me immediately. Ray Minkai's sudden solemn attitude made Olga stunned, but he still nodded. Is there something worth paying attention to? Ray Minkai pondered for a moment and decided to tell Olga something. Well, for example, if the appearance of those blue men suddenly changes or if they act abnormally, you must inform me immediately. In addition, be careful not to fight with blue man whose appearance has changed and who acts abnormally. Do you understand? Olga frowned, as if he was still digesting Ray Minkai's words. After a while, Olga nodded her head heavily. I understand. I will personally take charge of this side. As long as there is news, I will immediately inform Your Excellency. This warning was destined not to be carried out by Olga personally, because in the next second, Sino, who had just completed the routine communication, suddenly sent back a message. A message of life and death. Leader, can you hear me? Something big is happening now. Those swarthy fellows are on the move. Sino's tone was very anxious, but there was no other sound in the communication except for Sino's anxious voice. Not to mention, the movement of Blue Man's army will inevitably make a huge noise. Sino, calm down. What happened? Ray Minkai stepped forward and took the headset from the correspondent and asked, it's Your Excellency. Yes, that's right. The group of dark and swarthy fellows began to move. But they are not moving in the direction of Edmonton, but to the west. To the west. Ray Minkai and Olga looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Sino, speak clearly. Are they all moving to the west, or are they splitting their forces to the west? Yes, they're splitting their forces. Leader, Your Excellency, I saw a lot of swarthy guys running to the west. Although they could not see Sino's expression, the two could still hear Sino's gestures on the other side of the communication channel from his voice. Forget it. I'll just make a trip there. Leader Olga, I'll leave this to you. After hearing the last part, Ray Minkai gave up on the idea of continuing to ask Sino about the situation. But Your Excellency's body can't be used anymore, right? Olga immediately thought of the free Gao lying inside Naku, unable to be repaired in a short time. Body? Don't worry. I still have partners here that I can rely on. A few hours later, when a Stormfang lion wearing azure armor rushed to the front-line surveillance position, more than half of Blue Man's army that should have dyed the white snow black had already gone to the west. At this moment, Ray Minkai's expression was dignified. Olga, this is Ray Minkai. Do you have any news on your side? This is Olga. We did receive some news. In just a few short moments, Olga's voice became a little shaky. Your Excellency, just half an hour ago, the rest of the economic circles sent out a request for help. The ancient Doom ritual has completely erupted on Earth. Even the moon has many riots due to the revival of Doom ritual. Chapter 735. The Earth's outer orbit unified fleet finally welcomed their commander back. However, before this joy could rise, it was interrupted by a sudden piece of news. The ancient disaster sacrifice that should have disappeared in the long river of history had been revived. This news was not a secret to the higher-ups of Larshorn. After Hammonds attacked Edmonton, Gallahorn's headquarters received the relevant information. Moreover, The source of this information was almost all from the survivors when Hammonds attacked Edmonton. The survivors, led by Galileo and Calta, became the main source of information for Lars Horn to understand this sudden disaster sacrifice. In fact, Lars Horn had no other choice. After his Nerio Farid, who was supposed to be the mastermind, caused a ruckus, there were not many options left for Lars Horn. On one hand, under the operation of McGillis, he successfully entered the secret space hidden under Lars Horn's headquarters. On the other hand, Calta returned to the Earth's outer orbit unified fleet as quickly as possible and regained command of this fleet. Before the ancient disaster sacrifice was revived, Lars Horn's headquarters and even the other fleets ridiculed this unworthy fleet. However, in the current situation, only this fleet could deal with and even suppress the disaster sacrifice riots that broke out all over the Earth in the shortest amount of time. Although this was the case, most of the crew members of this fleet came from all over the Earth. From the moment the disaster sacrifice broke out, information from all over the Earth quickly drowned out these crew members' vision. Fear, unease, worry, even panic. This was the first scene that Calta saw when he returned to the fleet. In this regard, Calta did not immediately scold these people. The commander, who remained silent and did not take the initiative to express his position, seemed to be verifying something. He even faintly became the driving force of the repressed storm. "Sir Calta, no matter what, say something first." The subordinates who were lucky enough to survive the battle in the snowfield, were naturally happy to see their beloved commander return safe and sound. However, the current situation had reached the point where Calta could no longer remain silent, even if he wanted to. Carta, who was sitting on the captain's seat, looked up and glanced at his subordinates who he valued a lot in the past. Then, he withdrew his gaze and ignored them. Such a reaction made his subordinates even more anxious. "Lord Calta." In the next second, Calta raised his right hand and stopped his subordinates from speaking. "Calm down. I am very happy that you are still alive. However, now is not the time to act rashly. It's not just the people in the headquarters who are watching us, but also the major economic circles of the human world." Calta's voice was less high-spirited than before, but more steady, which made the subordinates who were familiar with Calta's style feel a little strange. However, should the subordinates be happy for Calta's change? Or do you feel more anxious and uneasy? Calta saw the anxiety of his subordinates, and also saw them wanting to say something but hesitating. After she looked around the bridge, she slowly stood up and said slowly, "I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. I understand everyone's concerns. I also understand everyone's fear. However, right now, the closest fleet to Earth is outside of the Earth's orbit. The other fleets will need at least 3 days to reach Earth's orbit. Moreover, their mission probably won't be to land on Earth immediately and suppress the ancient doomed sacrifice. Instead, they will choose to go to the moon and attack the active doom sacrifice there." Calta did not hold back at all as she explained the decision made by Lars Horn's headquarters before she returned to the fleet. Even though it was cruel, it was the truth. The timing of the doomed sacrifice outbreak was too subtle. First, Isnario Farid caused a ruckus at Lars Horn's headquarters. He buried Duke Bagurinzon and heavily injured Duke Rydal and Duke Falk. Only the 4 families of Bardawin, Farid, Kazan, and Calta remained. And in this family, the indecisive Duke Bardawin was the leader, followed by McGillis Farid, Iagu Kazan, and Calta Yetu. From this, it could be seen that Lars Horn, who seemed to have retained most of its strength, was already on the verge of splitting. Putting aside whether Duke Bardawin could stabilize the situation of Lars Horn after losing the oldest Duke Bagurinzon, Iagu Kazan, who became anxious because the most respected Rydal was seriously injured and unconscious, had already become a hidden danger for Lars Horn. In this situation, Calta knew very well that the first thing she had to do was to stabilize the Earth's orbit command fleet, then wait for an opportunity to move. Calta's explanation made her subordinates speechless. For a moment, they did not know what to say. "What? You were so anxious just now. Now, have all of you become mutes?" Kalta smiled, a trace of disdain in her eyes. This made her subordinates feel even more ashamed. Okay, no need to worry. Soon, the hope of breaking out of this situation will come. As if responding to Kalta's speculation, an emergency call from Earth became the opportunity for the Earth's Orbit Command Fleet to move again. Report. Commander. Headquarters called. Duke Kazan and the guards led by him lost contact with headquarters 12 hours ago. The arrival of this news made Kalta suddenly straighten up, and her eyes became abnormally sharp. Iga Kazan, you really did move. As mentioned earlier, Iagul Kazan, who had seen the most respected and worshipped person in his life, Restal Aryan, severely injured and unconscious, would most likely take some drastic actions after learning about the outbreak of the ancient doom ritual. Now, this speculation in the hearts of the three heirs of Bardawin, Farid, and Yethu really came true. Sir Kalta, his subordinates, who had also heard the news, hurriedly shouted out, "No need to say anymore. I know what you want to say, but now is not the time. Not the time. I don't want to say the same thing a third time." After witnessing Kalta's reaction to the news of Iagu, Kuzan's disappearance, the subordinates who were once again rejected by her looked at each other. Waiting. Still waiting. As the last battleship of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet arrived and joined the main force, several hours had passed. During this period, not only was there news from Larshorn headquarters, but there were also emergency communications from major economic circles around the world asking for help and other information. But in the face of this flood of information, Kalta was still able to maintain a calm and unhurried attitude, calmly responding to the requests for help from all sides. It was not until a message from Abro came that Kalta's calm face began to fluctuate. It was a land of the extreme north covered by vast ice and snow. It was also a mysterious place, shrouded in a faintly discernible aurora that resembled a soaring dragon. However, this video from the mysterious land of the extreme north faithfully recorded the process of a fierce battle that took place. The cold and fierce wind swept across the entire wasteland from north to south, causing the humans in this wasteland to stop in their tracks and look in awe at the nature that had caused this terrifying storm. However, under this awe, there were some humans full of courage. They were wearing thick winter clothes and lying on their stomachs behind piles of snow. Using their eyes hidden behind thick and warm masks, they silently stared at the wasteland covered in snow and ice. They stared at the northernmost land that might undergo a change. "Hey, Seno, why aren't you in MS? What are you doing here? Don't you think it's cold enough outside?" After Eugene put down the binoculars that were covered with a thin layer of snow in less than a minute, he reached out and pushed the guy next to him who ran out of the warm cockpit of MS. "Hey, Eugene, don't say that. Although the cockpit is very warm, it will make people sleepy after a long time. It's all those dark guys' fault. After half of them were sent out a few days ago, the rest didn't move at all. Even if a blizzard comes, they're still dead." Seno grinned, but he was unexpectedly poured a mouthful of cold wind, almost making him jump on the spot. Looking at the uncomfortable look on his partner's face, Eugene was both amused and helpless as he handed his thermos flask to Seno. "See, you don't want to stay in the cockpit, but you have to come out and suffer." Seno stepped back a little and found a position that was slightly away from the wind. He drank a few mouthfuls of warm water to warm his body and laughed. "I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. I'm just curious about what kind of movement Your Excellency will make later." Seno finally said the reason why he didn't want to stay in the cockpit, but ran out to the ice and snow to suffer. "Your Excellency." At the same time, when the Tusk Line Zero came to the extreme north, it also brought Ray Minkai's decision. In order to test the intentions of the Blue Man Army, who had been biding their time since the division, Ray Minkai finally decided to use the Tusk Line Zero as the main firepower reconnaissance mission. Although this decision was opposed by Olga, Eugene, and others when it was made public, but because of Ray Minkai's support for the Iron Flower Regiment, Olga and Eugene finally agreed. However, in order to ensure that the Tusk Line Zero and Ray Minkai could provide enough firepower support while completing the mission, Olga could be said to have painstaking efforts. While ensuring that the Iron Flower Regiment could provide the necessary armed support for Abro, she also transferred Senno's meteor and a mobile engineer team to the extreme north, waiting for the Tusk Line Zero to launch its firepower reconnaissance mission. This move, in Raiminkai's view, was superfluous. In the Battle of Genesis, the energy core swallowed by the Tusk Line Zero had almost been digested. As long as Raimikai and the Tusk Line Zero had a tacit understanding and used it properly, even if the Black Bow Angel appeared in front of him again, Raimikai would have the confidence to fight it. But no matter what, Raimikai still accepted Olga's kindness. The sky gradually darkened. The wind that swept through the snowfield became more violent and also more bone-chilling. The rapidly decreasing temperature made Eugene and Senno feel at a loss. It's about time. Senno, Eugene, come back. Or else, Olga will settle the score with me. Due to the low temperature, the communication device that was not working well sounded out. From the intermittent voice, Senno and Eugene could tell that the person who called them was Raimikai. It's about time. Let's go back. Okay. Glancing at each other, the two of them who were aware that they were about to be unable to withstand the increasingly cold temperature quietly retreated, pulling apart the distance between them and the silent extreme northern wasteland. Next, it was time for the Tusk Line Zero to make its debut. Whoa. The moment the sky turned completely dark, a signal flare that even the wind could not cover, its sharp, whistling sound rose into the air and instantly woke up all the dead things that were covered by the snow. The red light that lit up under the white snow continued to extend backward from the area that was scattered by the signal flare, all the way to a further, darker place. At first glance, the river formed by countless red lights was a bloody river that flowed from the dark hell to the mortal world. This amount. There are actually so many of them. Senno, who had returned to the cockpit of a meteor, saw the shocking red river at first glance. Even with the radar on the meteor, it would be difficult to determine in a short time how many Blummans were in the bloody river. Senno, prepare to support His Excellency. Eugene, who was in charge of commanding the mobile engineer team, also saw the moment the bloody river lit up. Urgency, panic. At this moment, the pressure on Eugene, who had always wanted to surpass Olga, was on his shoulders. However, before Sino could respond, a roar that was even more piercing and shocking than the sound of a signal flare tore apart the wild wind that swept across the land of the extreme north. Roar! The sky was dark, the wind was howling. Under the gloomy heaven domain, two cold golden lights quietly lit up. In the vast snow, the golden cold lights were like living creatures, sometimes contracting, sometimes expanding and swaying. Roar! With another roar, the wind and snow that swept the world seemed to stagnate, revealing the owner of the roar that penetrated the blizzard hidden under the dark sky. His golden mane of steel was like a supreme crown. The blood-red armor protected the gigantic steel lion's head, body, and limbs under it. The golden sharp teeth and claws emitted a cold light that seemed to be able to tear apart the blizzard that swept across the world. What made Eugene and Senno, who were watching the steel lion slowly walking out of the blizzard under the dark sky, even more concerned was the pair of blades that came from the heels of the front claws. If the steel lion wearing the golden crown and red lotus armor had sharp claws and sharp teeth that were terrifying enough, then the pair of blades that extended from the heels of the front claws would be even more terrifying. No, it should be said that it would make the Blummen's servants who were buried in the blizzard tremble in fear. That is, if these AI that only knew how to execute emotionless programs had feelings. Roar! Standing on a snowy hill and looking down at the bright and shocking blood-red river of light, the steel lion wearing a golden crown and red lotus armor was burning with fighting spirit. In an instant, a red light shot down from the snow hill and headed straight for the bloody river. Chapter 736. In the dark sky covered by the snowstorm, a red river of light was surging. It was as if a great wave had been stirred up, turning this snow-swept world upside down. In this movement that faintly suppressed the howling of the snowstorm, there was also a series of explosions that shook the sky. Swoosh! A streak of cold light swept across this world of ice and snow, bringing with it a series of explosions. It was Blue Man. It was the sound of the explosion when the small black MA with the electronic pupil with red light was cut off. These sounds rose and fell one after another, lingering incessantly in the ears. When the momentum was at its peak, even the snowstorm was suppressed by this movement, causing the humans who were watching this battle to be shocked. Hey, Eugene, didn't I remember someone saying that a cat catches a mouse? Now that I think about it, it seems like that's true. Sitting in the warm cockpit, Sino swallowed his saliva and stared at the red lotus steel lion that had charged in a Blue Man's army and turned the sky upside down. That's not a cat. That's a lion. A lion. Sino. Although Eugene felt the same way, he did not dare to openly admit this in the communication channel. Only God knew if Ray Minkai, who was piloting the red lotus steel lion, was in the communication channel. Sino was stunned, but he immediately understood what Eugene meant. However, he still could not help but mutter, "Put down the size. Isn't it just a cat and a mouse?" Roar! As the red lotus steel lion swung its front claws, the two incomparably sharp blades cut through the blue lotus steel lion's army of servants as if they were nothing. It destroyed one that came, split a pair that came, and slashed a group that came. Wherever the red lotus steel lion passed, it left behind the remains of Blue Man's army. There were even flames that were waving flags and cheering for the unstoppable red lotus steel lion. Kai, how long are we going to fight here? Although it's refreshing to fight casually, the number of these little things will tire me to death. From the powerful charge at the beginning, to the unstoppable killing, and now to the tiresome situation, State Zero could be said to have had a taste of the human wave tactic. Even though these Bloomin' servants were not enough, their numbers were indeed frightening. Based on the previous charge alone, even if State Zero did not calculate, he could roughly estimate that he had killed no less than 3 digits of MA's Brewman. But even so, the red river of light in front of the red lotus steel lion was unable to dim even a little. Wait a little longer. Ray Minkai had been observing the movements in the deepest part of the red river of light. It was impossible for such a large number of small moss servants to be left here. No matter how powerful the program that controls these small MAs is, there is still a core program that is responsible for giving orders. And this was exactly what Ray Minkai was looking for. Although the red lotus steel lion was quite jubilant, in fact, there was no movement in the deepest part of the Red River. It was not shaken by the metal ruins that were being swallowed by the flames behind the red lotus steel lion. There's no other way. State Zero, let's rush in. Roar! It had to be said that Ray Minkai's decision was exactly what State Zero wanted. The pleasure of rushing back and forth in the periphery of the Red River just now had made State Zero feel tired. To completely let State Zero vent the grievances of not being able to use his full strength during this period of time, it must be a stronger and more exciting enemy. As a result, the red lotus steel lion that was rushing back and forth among the Bloomin' servants suddenly paused, and then took advantage of the moment when the surrounding Bloomin' servants had not yet reacted. It twisted its body and the small plasma thrusters on its back and broke out with a powerful speed that was enough to leave the surrounding Bloomin' servants behind, and rushed to the deepest part of the red river of light. With this rush, the seemingly boundless red river instantly exploded into chaos. Originally, no matter how the red lotus steel lion rushed, it only shook the periphery of the red river of light, and the core troops in the deepest part were still as steady as a rock. However, the red lotus steel lion's charge caused the entire red river to start churning. Whether it was the Bloomin' servants behind the red lotus steel lion, the Bloomin' servants on both sides of the red lotus steel lion, or even further away, the Bloomin' servants in the deepest part of the red river of light, all rushed at the red lotus steel lion at their fastest speed. Oh, sure enough, there's something strange there. The abnormalities from the surrounding made Ray Minkai even more certain of his speculation. Rush over. State Zero was eager to try. Rush. The answer was obvious. Roar. A roar. The red lotus steel lion's golden crown-like mane suddenly spread out and extended out a golden mane that was slender and soft and could flutter in the wind. As the red lotus steel lion ran at high speed, its fluttering golden mane flickered in the wind, and an invisible screen suddenly appeared in front of the red lotus steel lion, crushing all the bloomin' servants in its way. Boom, boom, boom. A series of sparks and explosions followed the red lotus steel lion's footsteps closely, extending all the way to the deepest part of the Red River of Light. No matter how many bloomin' servants there were, or how strong their resistance was, in front of this invisible screen, they were as weak as clay chickens and pottery dogs, and could not stop the red lotus steel lion's footsteps at all. In just a few minutes, a path of flames with the red lotus steel lion as an arrow suddenly appeared, and a path to the deepest part of the Red River of Light appeared. Wonk. Suddenly, a flash of light flashed in front of Ray Minkai. State Zero. There was no hesitation. There was no hesitation. The moment his eyes caught the flash of light, Ray Minkai immediately warned his companions. Roar. The red lotus steel lion, which responded with a roar, immediately lowered its head. The moment the invisible screen became visible, the flash that flickered in the depths of the Red River arrived with a loud bang and directly bombarded the screen that had become visible. Boom! It was a beam of light that was full of terrifying energy and exuded a terrifying heat. Wherever it passed, even the snowstorm that could freeze creatures that rashly entered this world had to retreat. In an instant, the buzzing sound that accompanied the beam of light became the main character of this world, and it also drowned out the position of the red lotus steel lion. However, this terrifying beam of light did not achieve the result that it should have, because the bright, invisible screen had firmly blocked the beam of light that erupted from the depths of the Red River of Light. It did not allow it to move forward at all. The air was trembling. The roar of the energy reaction was even louder, but the screen was still sturdy. No matter how the enemy on the other side of the beam of light stimulated and squeezed out all the energy he could not break the screen in front of the red lotus steel lion. As time passed, the beam of light that directly bombarded the screen seemed to have a new movement. However, this was not a movement that was about to break through the screen. Instead, it was a movement that was guided by the screen's characteristics and twisted to the sides, causing most of the energy that directly hit the screen to be distorted to the sides of the red lotus steel lion. While the red lotus steel lion was competing with the beam of light, Blue Man's army that had been left behind finally caught up. Unexpectedly, they followed in Blue Man's footsteps and were blasted to the sky by the energy beams that were distorted to the left and right of the red lotus steel lion. Chance. State Zero. The pressure brought by the beam of light gradually decreased, and Ray Minkai decisively pushed the push rod to the limit. Roar. The fluttering golden fur became even more flamboyant and magnificent. The red lotus steel lion's four limbs once again exerted force, and like a cannonball, it charged towards the incoming beam of light. Clang! At the same time, the blades on the red lotus steel lion's left and right front claws were swung out, and the Blue Man's army that had gathered in front of the red lotus steel lion to try and stop it once again were chopped into pieces, and immediately lost the ability to stop the red lotus steel lion. The dazzling light that burst out from the beam of light gradually disappeared. The terrifying high temperature that forced the blizzard to retreat quickly cooled down. Facing the blizzard that was gathering again, the red lotus steel lion that had broken through the encirclement of Blue Man's army finally broke through to the front of its target. That was an old friend. Even though its body that was mainly white not long ago was now shrouded in a strange darkness, Ray Minkai still recognized the MA with its jaws slightly open, revealing the energy sparks that had yet to disappear. Kai, be careful. This big bird seems to be a little different. As soon as they met, State Zero's intuition made it instinctively warn him. Yes, understood. This guy might have been eroded by the abyss, State Zero's warning seemed to confirm Ray Minkai's conjecture. The obvious change in appearance was very similar to the abyss erosion that Ray Minkai was familiar with. Coupled with the fact that the Black Bow Angel had appeared twice to stop him, the M.A. Hammonds might have been eroded by the abyss. Roar! The Red Lotus Steel Lion raised its head and taunted the black M.A. Hammonds with a single slap after smashing Bloomin' into pieces. Seemingly provoked by the Red Lotus Steel Lion, the pitch-black M.A. Hammond's body glowed with a red light, forming lines that looked extremely strange. In the next second, the M.A. Hammond's long, sharp head suddenly raised, and the moment it let out a cry, it actually soared into the air and quickly distanced itself from the Red Lotus Steel Lion. Not good. That big bird is escaping. State Zero did not wait for Ray Minkai to speak, and was ready to jump up and forcefully slap the M.A. Hammonds down from the sky. In the end, before the Red Lotus Steel Lion could even jump up, the pitch-black M.A. Hammonds took the initiative and shot another beam of light at the Red Lotus Steel Lion from above. Of course, just like before, this beam of light didn't hit the Red Lotus Steel Lion. It was blocked by the screen. However, this delay caused the Red Lotus Steel Lion to lose the opportunity to stop the M.A. Hammonds in time. The M.A. Hammonds flew up into the sky and circled above the battlefield, commanding the Blue Man's servants to surround and attack the Red Lotus Steel Lion, while waiting for an opportunity to fire its beam cannons to find the Red Lotus Steel Lion's weakness. Swoosh! The Red Lotus Steel Lion's sword flashed, and close to 4 digits of the Blue Man's servants died under the Red Lotus Steel Lion's sword. However, they still fearlessly swarmed towards the Red Lotus Steel Lion. Their goal was to create an opportunity for Hammonds, who was hovering above the battlefield, to defeat or even kill the Red Lotus Steel Lion. Roar! State Zero let out a roar in displeasure. So what if you can fly? Kai, kill that damn bird. Let's go. Ray Minkai did not waste any more words. The endless Blue Man's miniatures not only annoyed State Zero, but also gave Ray Minkai a headache. No matter how many times they destroyed, they would always be able to fill in the gaps. It was as if the gaps had already been arranged from the beginning, and were only waiting for the Red Lotus Steel Lion to attack. The wind whistled. The blade of his sword moved with the wind. The Red Lotus Steel Lion spun a few times on the spot, then suddenly stopped. It lowered its body, exerted force on its 4 limbs, and leaped up. It leaped over the head of the Black Brahmin and landed firmly on the shimmering screen that appeared under its feet. Then, it leaped up again, repeatedly using the shimmering screen as a stepping stone as it pounced toward the Black Brahmin. Not only did State Zero's move cause the Blue Man's minions to freeze, it also caused the M.A. Hammonds to be unable to react in time. Fortunately, the order that my Hammonds had received was to wipe out all enemies that came to invade their territory. The shocking move of the Red Lotus Steel Lion only caused the black M.A. Hammonds to issue a warning that it could not be analyzed before it was immediately covered by the attack priority program. Wong! The light of the beam cannon tore through the sky, breaking through the blockade of the blizzard and heading straight for the Red Lotus Steel Lion that was charging into the sky using the screen as its steps. This time, the Red Lotus Steel Lion didn't take the attack head-on. Instead, it stepped on the screen wall and avoided the beam cannon's firing axis in time, avoiding the attack. TSK, you still like to play dirty. Looking at the light beam that pierced through the air and created a gap in Blue Man's army, State Zero decisively gave up on stepping on the screen wall and used a movement method that it was not used to yet. Wong 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 wong. A low rumbling sound came from the Red Lotus Steel Lion's back. Countless light particles appeared from thin air, and with the Red Lotus Steel Lion's back as the center, they quickly gathered to form a pair of similar silhouettes. Crack! Bang! Immediately after, the sound of something breaking rang out. A pair of dazzling wings appeared on the Red Lotus Steel Lion's back. As the wings flapped, the Red Lotus Steel Lion led the Red Lotus Steel Lion to avoid the attack that followed closely behind. In just a split second, a meteor appeared above the beam of light. In a barbaric and unreasonable manner, it directly knocked the pitch-black Hammonds down from the sky. Boom! The shock wave caused by the heavy object crashing into the ground caused Bruman's servants, who were closest to it, to stagger and lose their formation. At the center of the shock wave, the crimson lotus steel lion raised its front claws and viciously slammed down on the pitch-black M.A. Hammonds beneath its body. You can fly. Amazing. Chapter 737. When the red lotus steel lion was beating up Hammonds on the battlefield on the other side of the earth, a young man, whose forehead was filled with anger and his chest was filled with burning hot blood, clenched his fists and stared at the city engulfed by the flames of war for a long time. Since the revival of the ancient calamity sacrifice, dozens of cities have been destroyed by the eruption of calamity sacrifice. The city in front of the young man was one of these dozens of cities, and it was a city that had just fallen. If the young man and the troops he led could have arrived half an hour earlier, the city might not have fallen. At the very least, they could have saved more people. Lord Iagu, our troops have finished assembling. We can move out at any time. The subordinates loyal to the young man, Iagu Kazan, and also loyal to the Kuzan family, and even more loyal to Lars Horn, ran up from the bottom of the hill. Yes, I know. Get ready for battle. We've already missed this city. Iagu Kuzan sighed in his heart. It had been almost half a month since Ristal Aryan fell into a coma from his injuries, right? During this period of time, Iagu Kazan felt like a year, and he was burned by the raging flames of anger for a long, long, long time. It was so long that Iagu Kazan felt as if he had lost his anger. Fortunately, at this time, he led his subordinates away from Lars Horn's headquarters and came here to witness the fall of the city after it was attacked by Calamity Sacrifice. From this, Iagu Kazan could feel that the flames of anger caused by revenge still existed in his heart. Looking at the burning city, he was shocked. Iagu Kazan looked at the scattered sparks from the city that were swept up by the hot wind. He suddenly felt that he should say something, but he did not say anything in the end, until another subordinate with an anxious expression brought a piece of shocking news. Lord Iagu, what's wrong? Why are you in such a panic? The subordinate standing next to Iagu Kazan could not help but scold him. Yes, this subordinate has been rude, but I'm sure Lord Io will be very concerned about this information. The man who had brought the report carefully presented it to Iagu Kazan. Ianu was a little puzzled, but he still reached out to take it. When he opened it, his expression changed. The next second, Iaglu raised his head again and gnashed his teeth. To actually dare to appear so brazenly. Isnario Farid, you traitor. The information brought by his subordinates was not his business. Instead, it was a special piece of information that came from the encrypted communication channel used by the Seven Stars family. According to intelligence agents who risked their lives to investigate, a man suspected to be Isnario Farid had appeared somewhere in the Mediterranean region of the African Union before the outbreak of adversity sacrifice. The appearance of this information was undoubtedly an opportunity for Ayag to vent his anger. Everyone, now is the time to wash away the humiliation of us and Lars Horn's headquarters being attacked. It's a great opportunity to bring the shame of giving birth to a traitor and triggering an ancient adversity sacrifice to us and Lars Horn's traitor, Isnario Farid. Squeezing the paper in his hand into a ball, Iagur Kazan gritted his teeth and growled. At the same time, the subordinates who heard the commotion gathered around him. Looking at these subordinates with respect, trust, and even worship on their faces, Iagur Kazan slowly raised his right hand and said righteously, Everyone, now is a great opportunity for us and Lars Horn to wash away the humiliation. The whereabouts of the traitor Isnario Farid have been locked down by us. Next, we will personally kill this traitor and let us and Lars Horn bask in supreme glory again. So everyone, please lend me your strength. Yes, Lord Io. Yes, as long as I can follow Lord Io, I will do anything. In the face of Iagur Kazan's words, the subordinates expressed their most sincere thoughts. Therefore, Iager and his group followed the guidance of the intelligence and came to a country south of the Mediterranean Sea in Africa. This place was also under attack from the ancient adversity sacrifice. Fortunately, compared to other cities that were focused on by the ancient adversity sacrifice, this city, which was located on the edge of the desert and was only built as a supply point when entering the desert, did not suffer a strong attack from the ancient adversity sacrifice. Relying on the small number of troops in this city, it miraculously supported the outbreak of the first wave of the ancient adversity sacrifice. Therefore, when they saw Iager cousin leading a mobile force consisting of 5 glaziers and many mobile engineers from afar, the person in charge of the city took the initiative to greet them. Assist in the defense? No. Mr. Mayor, you misunderstand. We're going to pursue the traitor. It's not our duty to assist in the defense. Unexpectedly, the enthusiastic mayor was rejected by Iagu before he could put his warm face on the table. Then, before the mayor could react, Iager immediately asked, "Do you know the whereabouts of Isnario Farid? According to our intelligence, this damned traitor once appeared near this city." Traitor? The poor mayor took a long time to recover from Iager's question, and when he saw Iager cousin's displeased expression, he bowed and apologized again and again. "Sorry. Very sorry. I was just recalling the list of people who appeared during this period of time." The mayor, who was afraid of offending Iager cousin, was quick-witted and casually said a reason that made Iager cousin somewhat concerned. Yes. If it really was Isnario Farid who appeared in the vicinity of our city, there would surely be a record of it. But we need some time to look for records. How about 1 hour? I'll only give you 1 hour. After 1 hour, if you can't give me an answer, then I'll go find it myself. Without waiting for the mayor to finish speaking, Iager cousin set a time limit on the spot. Looking at the mobile troops that were temporarily parked at the side of the city, the poor mayor didn't know whether to be happy or worried. 1 hour passed very quickly. When the mayor, who was sweating profusely, hurried over with his subordinates, he saw that the Greys team had already prepared to attack, and the mobile troops parked at the side were the same. However, compared to the Greys team that was facing the desert, the mobile troops seemed to be facing the city intentionally or unintentionally. This discovery made the mayor and the others wipe their sweat. Did Isnario Farid really come to this city? Looking at the document handed over by the mayor, Iager cousin frowned. When the truth was so easily placed in front of his eyes, even Iager cousin couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. Yes. It's just that Isnario Farid didn't seem to have entered our city. He just passed by the outskirts of our city and entered the desert. The mayor nodded repeatedly, and while speaking, he pointed to the desert behind the city. The desert? It seems that it won't be so easy to catch that damn traitor. Iager cousin, who threw the document back to the mayor, ignored the mayor's pleading face and decisively turned to face the Greys team. "Everyone, the traitor's whereabouts have been determined. We are only 1 step away from the supreme glory of the glorious era and Lars Horn." "Yes, Sir Iager." In the loud voice of his subordinates, Iager cousin boarded his mech, rushed out of the temporary camp, and entered the desert without looking back. Looking at the billowing sand again, the mayor wanted to cry, but had no tears as he watched Iager cousin and his men enter the desert with only yellow sand. "Mayor, should we inform Lars Horn?" the subordinate asked. No need. Let's take the people away from here." For some reason, looking at the billowing sand in the distance, the mayor suddenly sighed. His subordinates looked at each other, but they still did as they were told. After all, evacuating to a safer city was much better than staying in this small city that had exhausted all its defensive forces. Let's not talk about the fate of this city. Iager cousin and his men marched in the desert continuously for 3 days, but they could not find any traces of human activity in this desert. Whether it was day or night, all they could find was yellow sand and the scorching sun and cold moon that were constantly rotating above their heads. The fruitless search made the anger in Iager cousin's heart burn hotter, more vigorous, and more terrifying. Even when the scorching sun was high in the sky, Iager, who was more and more eager to find his Nerio Farid, did not even care how terrifying the scorching hot armor was. He directly stepped on it and carefully searched all the places he could see with his binoculars. But the result was the same, except for the yellow sand. It was still yellow sand. Their originally high morale was gradually depleted as the endless yellow sand flew into the air. Another day passed. When the incomplete moon rose again, the subordinates, who had already skillfully dealt with the temperature that continued to drop in the desert night, unpacked their bags one after another and prepared to spend the night and make arrangements for duty. Everything looked so normal and calm. However, a sudden change occurred. Rustle, rustle, rustle. A series of rustling noises were heard. Taking advantage of the opportunity, when Iager and the others had just put down their bags and were preparing to spend the night, they suddenly rushed out from under the yellow sand. As the yellow sand scattered all over the sky, a few black shadows rushed to the side where the mobile engineers were, setting off a bloody storm. Screams accompanied by the strong smell of blood swept over on the spot, stunning Iager and the others on the spot. Quickly return to the body. It's Mon. Bro Mon. There were also capable people among Iager's subordinates. But even so, the mobile engineers had almost lost half of their strength. In less than a minute, the sudden attack had easily crippled the mobile engineer team. Sir Iager, please come closer to us. Iager, who was pushed into the cockpit by his subordinates, had just started the body. From the lit-up screen, he looked at the two Greys who had completed the activation first and took the initiative to approach. Pay attention to the surrounding situation. The situation in Iager Kazan's mind had changed, but he would not back down because of this. Since the attack had happened, it meant that the enemy hiding behind the scenes was about to show up. Rustle, rustle. The rustling sound came again. Even the undulating sand dunes that appeared with these strange sounds were locked on by Gray's optical camera. It's the enemy. The enemy is under the sand. Looking at the enemy swimming under the desert, Grays, who had finished approaching Iager Kazan, raised their guns and fired bullets on the undulating sand dunes. But even if the sand area was blown up, the enemy lurking under the sand was not harmed at all. Isnario Farid. I didn't expect that a traitor who only knows how to hide and scheme all day long would be born in the 7-star family. I'm really ashamed of Lars Horn and the 7-star family. Ayagul Kuzan frowned as he watched his men sniping at the enemy hiding under the sand, but to no avail. He could not help but roar angrily. Oh, I only know how to hide and scheme all day long. Kid from the Kazan family, you're really naive. A burst of sneer suddenly sounded in the communication channel between Grays and Iager Kazan, and others were startled. It must be known that this communication channel was not the mainstream channel used by Lars Horn. This was only the communication channel used by the Grays troops led by Iager Kazan. Such a hidden and confidential communication channel was actually cracked by someone. Humph. Sure enough, you're still wet behind the ears. You're actually scared by a little trick. Ristal Aryan really knows how to choose obedient and stupid puppies. As soon as these words came out, it immediately aroused Iager's anger. Isnario Farid. Don't insult Sir Ristal. Insult. Ha! I'm insulting Ristal Aryan? Kid from Kazan. Do you know that this is the truth? Shut up. Come out. You traitor. I'm going to punish you on behalf of Lars Horn. The Greys driven by Iager Kazan turned back and forth, looking around, but could not find any place to hide. Punish? Ha ha ha. Interesting. But before that, I want to show you something. As soon as Isnario Farid's voice fell, the screams of Iager's subordinates could be heard. Sir Iager, be careful above your head. Above my head. When Iager subconsciously raised his head, the screen in front of him suddenly turned black. Then a cold gust of wind blew above his head. Then a cold touch followed, piercing deeply into Iager Kazan's spine. Come on, kid from the Kazan family. I wonder what you'll become when you see that your praise for Ristal Aryan is fake. Chapter 738. A huge black shadow shrouded the Reginald, which was piloted by Iago Kazan. Among them, there were looming shadows hanging from the top of the Reginald, covering most of the steel body, making it impossible for Iago Kazan's subordinates to see the situation in the cockpit of the Reginald. No matter how they called out in the communication channel, the Reginald was like a dead object. It did not respond to the calls, nor did it make any movement. From a moment the huge black shadow appeared, the subordinates could only remember the moment when Iago Kazan suddenly became painful. Damn it, Isnario Farid. What did you do to Master Iago? There was no doubt. The huge black shadow was the traitor that Iago Kazan and his men were looking for. The target was here. Iago Kazan, who was leading them, fell into silence. So, under these various factors, the Glaze team launched an operation on the spot. The 120mm rifles in the hands of the Glaze team constantly fired a series of bullets at the huge black shadow, wantonly creating beautiful sparks on the huge black shadow. However, this gorgeous display of sparks made someone hidden behind the scenes feel displeased. A puppy's puppy? Oof. How loyal. Covered by the black shadow, Reginald, who was particularly hazy, suddenly trembled and seemed to move. This surprised the Glaze team, who were jointly besieging the huge black shadow. Master Iago, are you okay? Master Iago, get away from that strange black shadow. We'll support you. The loyal subordinates called out Iago Kazan's name in the communication channel. The black shadow stirred, and Reginald, who was shrouded by it, slowly raised his hands, clenched his fists as if he was trying to catch something, and then tore it apart forcefully. Rip! The sound of something being torn apart rang in the hearts of the Glaze team's pilots. Reginald, whom they had been calling for, and his pilot, finally broke free from the shadow that was shrouded in darkness. Without hesitation, the Glaze team, who had a tacit understanding in the past, immediately sent 2 Glaze mechs forward, supported Reginald, and tried to take him away from the black shadow. Lord Iago, please hold on. We will be right there. Just as the 2 Glazers were about to support Reginald and retreat, the 2 Glazers suddenly stopped in their tracks. This puzzled the teammates who were attacking the shadows and providing cover for their retreat. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Why aren't you bringing Lord Iago along? Amidst the flickering flames of the 120mm rifle, the 2 Glazers supporting Reginald, Rez, trembled slightly and fell to the left and right at almost the same time. Boom! The moment the heavy body fell on the sand dune, 2 long and sharp spikes with traces of engine oil at the end appeared in front of the remaining Grez pilots. This was not an attack from the enemy, but from the Reginald, piloted by Iago Kazan, whom they sought to rescue. Clang! The moment the sound of metal vibrating tore through the air, Glaze's pilots clearly saw the 2 spikes retract into Regan Rez's body. As far as they knew, Regan Rez had never been equipped with such a strange weapon. What's more, as Regan Rez's pilot, Iago Kazan would not have any thoughts about such a strange weapon. Lord Iago. However, no matter what their impression of the past was and what they saw in front of their eyes, the result was that Reginald Reynolds, who they were supposed to rescue, and even Iago Kazan, had suddenly attacked and killed their subordinates with their own hands. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A strange buzzing sound suddenly rang out and reverberated on the sand dune for a long time. Amidst this strange buzzing sound, the huge shadow that had been acting as the target of Glaze's team quietly retreated, giving the sand dune to Regan Rez, who had become somewhat abnormal. Adlar's Horn's soldiers. How can this be? This is Iago Kazan, whom you revere, whom you pledge allegiance to. As the huge shadow retreated, Isnario Farid's voice echoed in the communication channel with a hint of mockery. Shut up, traitor. What did you do to Lord Iago? Stop right now. Among the remaining Glazers, a Glazer suddenly rushed out and raised the 120mm rifle in his hand to attack the huge shadow that was slowly retreating while shouting in grief and indignation. Jed? Lord Iago would never kill Jed. Jed was praised by Master Iago not long ago. He will definitely become the best pilot in Lars Horn. Two, 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 two. The low roar of the 120mm rifle was like the anger that erupted from the heart of the Grey's pilot. It surged toward the huge shadow like a tidal wave. The momentum was quite shocking. Hidden behind the scenes, Isnario Farid wasn't frightened by this scene. Instead, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. The best pilot? Very good. Then, let your esteemed Iago cousin test you. A mournful red light flashed from above the sand dune, and a black shadow appeared in front of Gretz, who was charging towards the huge black shadow. Bang! At the same time, the sound of metal being pierced followed closely. A trace of bright red that stung the eyes of the other Grey's pilots slowly flowed out of the hole that was pierced through and quietly mixed with the oil that was rolling down the sand dune. Creak! The change came so quickly. It caught everyone off guard. The two fallen Glazers could still deceive themselves and clear Iago cousin's name by deceiving themselves. Then, when the scene repeated itself in front of them, where the Glazer who attacked the huge shadow was killed by Regan Gretz, the pilots probably wouldn't be able to clear Iago cousin's name anymore, right? Bang! Gretz, with a hole in the cockpit, rolled down the sand dune powerlessly, splashing a burst of sand and dust. Looking at the hole covered with sand and dust, the remaining Grey's pilots couldn't help but recall the words that the pilot said before his death to clear Iago cousin's name. Hypnosis? Control? They didn't know the truth. The only thing they knew was that Regan Gretz and even Iago cousin might really want to bury them here. Is there anyone left alive from the mobile engineer unit? There were only 2 remaining Glazers left, and the fate of the mobile engineer unit was unknown. However, as soon as they thought about the possibility of being surrounded by the small M.A. Blomans, the remaining 2 Glaze pilots no longer held any hope for the possibility of the mobile engineer unit still being alive. Is this our last battle? After the 2 Graze pilots looked at each other through the screen, they both showed a determined look. If that's the case, then we will use our lives to awaken our most respected Sir Iago cousin. Thus, the fire of determination to die was ignited. The 2 Glazers launched a charge from the left and right, raising their weapons and aiming at the target. Under the control of the 2 pilots, the 120mm rifles in the hands of the Glazers spat out flames full of anger and determination, vowing to completely devour the enemy in front of them. But this attack full of determination was not launched at Regan Gretz, but at the huge shadow that was slowly retreating. So you're still coming to attack me? Oomph. As expected, they were still stupid humans. Iago cousin, it's your turn. When Isnario Farid saw the 2 remaining Glaze pilots erupt with a determination to not fear death, he thought that he would be able to see a good show between his superior and his subordinates. But he did not expect that these Glaze pilots would choose to aim their guns at the Black Shadow. Such a boring result made Isnario Farid want to end this farce as soon as possible. Therefore, Regan Gretz, who was deliberately avoided by the 2 Glazers, moved again. The strange buzzing sound became deeper and more frightening. The moment the flames from the thrusters became brighter, 2 spikes grew out of Regan Gretz's palms, and with a wave of Regan Gretz's hands, they went straight for the backs of the 2 Glazers. As the low buzzing sound of the Ahab furnace increased its output, the Glazers, who were targeted by Regan Gretz, avoided the attack from behind in time. Looking at the spike that almost buried him, the Grey's pilot no longer had any reaction. So, you're not going to let us go? Lord Iago. Joseph, I'll cover you. No, you go and kill that shadow. Only then can we. The Glazer pilot named Joseph was just about to ask his teammates to take this opportunity to attack the huge shadow, but unexpectedly, he lost sight of Regan Gretz. Moreover, the moment he noticed this scene, a black dot seemed to have appeared in the center of the screen in front of him. This black dot rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, this black dot became a spike that pierced the heart of the Glazer pilot named Joseph. Joseph, Lord Iago, what the hell are you doing? That's your right-hand man. The expression of the last Grez pilot was one of despair and helplessness. The comrades that he was familiar with and trusted were actually buried one by his boss that he respected and was loyal to. How could he accept such a scene? That, even if he knew that Ayagul Kazan might be controlled. Clang! Under the gaze of the last Glazer pilot, the spikes dripping with bright red slowly retracted. The electronic pupil flashing with a terrible red light appeared in front of his eyes. Regan Gretz, this ominous mech that had buried all his subordinates, finally noticed him. Raise the gun and shoot. When the trigger was pulled, the only sound that came was the empty sound of the empty bullet. Pull out the blade? The last Glazer pilot smiled and gave up the idea of raising the blade to resist Ayagul. Lord Ayagul Kazan, if my sacrifice can remind you of the glory of the Kazan family in Lars Horn, then take it. My life. Our beloved Ayagul Kazan. The last Glazer abandoned all his weapons and rushed up with his bare hands. He hugged Regan Gretz and tried to push Regan Gretz away from the huge shadow. Push away as much as possible. Clang. The strange sound of metal piercing through objects sounded, and bright red flowers splashed in Glazer's cockpit. But the pain of tearing his body did not make the last Glazer pilot stop his actions. Lord Ayagul, just watch. This is our life. Clang. He was determined to die, but in the end he was interrupted by the next spike that completely pierced through the cockpit. Glazer, who had lost his determination to die, fell down with a bang. Regan Gretz, who had pierced through him, stood quietly in place and looked at the huge shadow from afar. Between the two, there were 5 Glazers that had fallen on the sand dune and rolled to the bottom of the sand dune. At this moment, the hot desert wind blew through the sand dune, bringing up bursts of sand that buried Glazer. It became more and more intense, and more covered the sky. When the sand dune regained its clear sky, the sand dune had already changed its appearance. What was left was Regan Gretz, who was still standing there and looking at each other from afar, and the huge shadow that could not be shaken even by the strong sandstorm. Ka! Clang! The sound of a blade being drawn shook the scorching air. Regan Gretz raised the blade in his hand and pointed it at the direction of Lars Horn's headquarters from afar. The next moment, the communication signals from all over the world suddenly became chaotic. Shah! Abro's communication with the extreme north was cut off. Eugene, who did not know what was going on, climbed out of the mobile engineer's cockpit and waved his right hand at the red Lotus steel line that was stepping on the dark wreckage of M.A. Hammonds from afar. Shah! Lars Horn's headquarters had just received an emergency communication from a city in the south of the Mediterranean Sea, but the signal was suddenly cut off, which made the CIC in charge of communication puzzled. Shah! Listening to the meaningless noise, Kalte Yet-Hugh, who commanded the Earth Command Unified Fleet to descend to a suitable landing operation, silently looked at the desert south of the Mediterranean Sea. Just now, according to the information fed back by the global surveillance satellite, there seemed to be a battle between 2 MS in the desert. Although the resolution of the photo was not high, Kalte Yet-Hugh could still tell that both sides of the battle were using Lars Horn's active MS commander. There is an unknown signal hijacking our communication. What? Can you release it? Yes. Put it on the main screen now. The next second, a picture with a yellow sand background appeared on the main screen. And in the center of the picture, there was a machine that raised its blade and pointed at a certain direction in the sky. In the name of the head of the 7-star family Kuzan family, Ayag Kuzan, will in the name of supreme righteousness purge all the corrupt scum that occupy Lars Horn's high position and bring a revolution in the name of justice to Lars Horn. Chapter 739. Warm sunlight passed through the window and scattered into the clean room. As the curtains fluttered in the breeze, a blond man with a handsome face and a tall figure opened the door of this ward that had been upgraded to a special care level. Other than the exclusive medical staff, only a few people could enter the ward. Seems like you've recovered well. Duke Arian. With vigorous footsteps, the blond man glanced at the middle-aged man who was sitting on the bed and silently looking at the ocean outside the window, and said in a clear voice, "It doesn't matter. This small injury isn't a big deal." The middle-aged man, who was addressed as Duke Allen by the blond man, turned around and glanced at the blond man standing beside the bed before nodding slightly. "Seems like the Farid family is already yours. Matt-Killis Farid, young Duke Farid." Those eyes that seemed to be able to see through one's heart didn't seem to bring any pressure to the blond man. Or perhaps, from the very beginning, the blond man called McKillis Farid didn't care that the other party could see through him. "No, Duke Arian, you're wrong to say that. I only took over this position and all the responsibilities that come with it because I want to clean up the mess left behind by Lars Horn, no, Isnario Farid, who has already become the public enemy of humanity." McGillis's calmness made Duke Arian frown. Ever since that incident, he, who had been in a coma due to his serious injuries, had already developed a sense of disconnection from this world. Not only was the ancient doom sacrifice revived, but there was also the unforeseen event of Iagu Kazan leaving with his subordinates. Even if he had already woken up, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find a way out of this unforeseen event. McKillis. No, Duke Farid. What's the current situation in the headquarters? Although I already know that Duke Falk has also fallen into a coma due to his serious injuries, what about the other family heads? Rian. Restau Rian's words were probably a sign of weakness, right? It didn't matter how isolated this ward was. As long as Duke Adrian wanted to know something, it wouldn't be difficult for him to do so. The reason why he said and did this was probably because of the golden-haired man in front of him, McGillis Farid. Not only did he take advantage of his Nerio Farid's rebellion to take control of the Farid family, he even took advantage of Duke Bakaranzan's death to pull the Bakaranzan family onto his chariot. On top of that, there was also the Baduin family who had already made a marriage agreement with her. Now, McGillis Farid probably had all the power of 3 of the 7-star clans under his control. In that case, Restau Arian's display of weakness was probably just a matter of pushing the boat along with the current. Headquarters. Right now, the affairs of the headquarters will be handled by Duke 1 and Duke Badu. I, McGillis Farid, will be in charge of consolidating the forces Lars Horn can mobilize in the various economic circles on Earth to form an army capable of resisting the ancient doom sacrifice. As for McGillis paused midway, as if to give Restau time to digest the news. The returned Kalta, Yethu has already returned to the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet and is preparing to integrate the landing forces of the Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet in the shortest time possible to cooperate with my plan and wait for an opportunity to launch a counterattack against the ancient doom sacrifice. Kalta Yethu. Hearing this name, Restau recalled the news of Kalta being captured. Unfortunately, after he was rescued, he didn't have time to meet him before the attack launched by the traitor Isnario Farid interrupted all his plans. Then, after a moment of silence, Restau slowly opened his mouth. "What about Iaga Kazan? Duke Kazan? Is there any news about him?" When Restau asked about Iagu Kazan, a light suddenly flashed in McGillis's eyes. "Yes, not long ago, we received news from Iaga Kazan, Duke Kazan." With that said, McGillis took out the tablet computer he carried and handed it to Lestau. "I'm very sorry. Because the ancient doom sacrifices offensive is too fierce, we in Lars Horn don't have much spare manpower. If Duke Allen wants to take action, I'm afraid he will have to personally call his trusted subordinates." After seeing Lestau take the tablet, McGillis smiled and continued, "I'm not sure if you'll be able to use it. Then, Duke Allen, forgive me for taking my leave first." McGillis' departure was not beyond Rizdal's expectations. In fact, even if McGillis didn't say anything, Restau would have seen some clues from the medical staff who came to check the injury. Iagu Kazan, this reckless person who left Lars Horn's headquarters with his subordinates without saying a word. The moment the tablet screen lit up, Rizdal's thoughts suddenly became like a monstrous wave, constantly rolling up huge waves in his mind, attacking Rizdal's rationality. This ignorant person, Perhaps many years ago, on an afternoon with the same warm sun, Restal Arian, who had temporarily escaped from the heavy business of Arianhead's fleet, was strolling in the garden shared by the Seven Stars family when he coincidentally bumped into the father and son. Everything was destined at that moment. Recalling the pair of eyes that always looked at him with admiration and worship, Restal couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. Every sentence was always inseparable from the righteousness promoted by Lars Horn. The righteous child who carried out justice frowned slightly in the man who witnessed the changes in the world. The child who so easily regarded others as the object of his worship. The child who so easily put the so-called righteousness and justice on his mouth and wishfully asked others to follow his ideas and carry out the righteousness he agreed with. The righteous child, can he really become the patriarch of the Kuzan family, one of the Seven Stars family? Restal had a lot of guesses about the answer to this question, but the result was never reached. Until, at this moment, when he was playing the video on the tablet that McGillis personally sent to him. The man who was regarded by many soldiers of Lars Horn as the man who would lead Lars Horn to glory was defeated by reality in the end. He silently watched the video about Iagu, Kazan, silently opened the communication channel, then silently edited a message and sent it to the Arianhead fleet that was loyal to him. The man who was like a giant pillar of Lars Horn slowly leaned on the bed and fell into a dead silence until the incomplete moon slowly rose. Iagu Kazan family. Let me take care of it myself. McGillis, who left the hospital, did not return to Lars Horn's headquarters, but came to the command center that was temporarily set up as the Frontline Command Center. Since the first day of the establishment of the Frontline Command Center, all the elites that could be mobilized in the headquarters of Gallahorn had been transferred here by Duke Bedouin regardless of family background, and they were all under the command of McGillis. Not for anything else, but to be able to establish a force that could stop the ancient doomed sacrifice in the shortest time possible. As long as people were slightly well-informed, they would have already seen through Duke Badu's thoughts. Although there were signs of the recovery of the ancient doomed sacrifice, it had already caught Lars Horn, who had been comfortable for 300 years, off guard. Even if enough troops could be gathered in the shortest time possible, it would be difficult to launch a counterattack against the ancient doomed sacrifice. Is there any news from Abro? Just like the news received by Kalta, the video message from Abro was also received by Lars Horn's headquarters. Unlike the doubts shown by Kalta, when he saw the steel lion that could easily destroy Lars Horn's fleet, McGillis knew that this war full of unstable factors was about to usher in an opportunity to turn things around. No, not yet. Commander, take the initiative to contact Abro. Now, if we have a little more power in our hands, we can take one step closer to victory. After that, McGillis looked to the other side again. There was the command hub that commanded all the fleets gathered in the East Sea of Lars Horn's headquarters. How is our fleet gathering now? Yes, Commander. The fleets that we can currently gather in the designated sea area in a short period of time have completed all temporary formation tasks, and the mothership as the command center has been clarified. Now, our fleet is ready to attack at any time. McGillis was very satisfied with this result, because this fleet not only represented Lars Horn's flag flying again at the forefront of the resistance against doomed sacrifice, but it also represented the reappearance of the myth from 300 years ago. Very good. Then, after transferring my body to the mothership, the entire fleet will turn to Oceania and blow the horn of resistance against doomed sacrifice for Lars Horn again. Yes, long live Lars Horn. Perhaps it was intentional, or perhaps it was unintentional. The moment McGillis gave the order, a body appeared on the main screen of the command center, and even on the screens of the entire fleet. A legendary body that had been sleeping for hundreds of years, and no one had been able to wake it up. AWS G01 Gout Das Skeleton Bailai. The legendary body that had once led humans to resist the reign of terror set off by Doom Sacrifice MA had appeared once again reviving in the current world where the ancient Doom Sacrifice had revived. At this moment, Not only was the legend reappearing, but it was also an opportunity for all the Lars Horn soldiers to witness the reappearance of his body and watch the entire process of it slowly being transferred from the port to the mothership of the fleet. Gau das Bailey. For me, for Lars Horn, it has brought a brand new reform. Right in the middle of this war between humans and the ancient doom sacrifice. On the snowfield that had been ravaged by the blizzard, numerous pitch-black killing machines were no longer in their original state. They were lying on the snow-covered wasteland. They no longer had fangs that could exterminate humans, nor did they have terrifying weapons that could tear humans apart in the blink of an eye. There were the broken bodies that remained on this snowfield. And in the center of this snowfield that was filled with countless black wreckage, a steel lion wearing Red Lotus armor raised its front paw and smashed the sharp head that it was stepping on into pieces. Boring. The holographic image of the white cat, State Zero, appeared on Raymond Kai's right hand. This white cat that had not appeared in public for a long time shook its front paw unhappily. After fighting for so long, it's just a fake. Can't even be counted as a punching bag. Unlucky. What State Zero meant was that when he used the power of the Lambda Drive system and was about to cause a ruckus, M.A. Hammonds, who was supposed to be resisting with all his might, and even the Blue Man's army of servants, who were supposed to be fighting a battle to their heart's content, suddenly stopped. Not only was the pitch-black M.A. Hammonds that looked like it could fight a few rounds with State Zero, but it was also slapped to the ground by State Zero. Even the Blue Man army that surrounded it had turned into wooden dummies, allowing State Zero to do whatever he wanted. Such a posture of no resistance made State Zero, who was burning with fighting spirit, suddenly lose the mood. It's just a bait. Looking at the video message sent by Eugene, combined with the situation that Sino had investigated before, Ray Minkai had already understood what was going on with the pitch-black M.A. Hammonds and the Blue Man army. Perhaps, from the beginning, Doom's sacrifice's intention was not here, but somewhere else. I didn't expect Isnario Fard to be so generous as to throw this army here as bait. What a big move. If Ray Minkai were to make the decision himself, he would not be willing to make such a decision. Although this MA army did not pose much of a threat to the Longhorn Line Zero, this was limited to the Longhorn Line Zero, which was completely out of the norm. Most of the other conventional mecha would probably be in a precarious situation when faced with the attack of this MA army that could exceed thousands. If placed on the battlefield with Lars Horn, it would certainly be a fresh force that could overturn the situation of the battlefield and reverse the outcome of the battle. Bait? Just these lousy things. Even the power of the Lambda Drive system can't break through. What kind of army is this? State Zero snorted disdainfully. The Red Lotus Steel Lion's front claws were still grinding the M.A. Hammond's broken head back and forth. Let's go. The next battle is probably about to start. That's good. I haven't stretched my muscles yet. In the white cat's nagging, the Red Lotus Steel Lion waved its front claws, pushed the wreckage under its feet to the side in disgust, and turned back to meet up with Eugene and Sino. Chapter 740. Colorful flags fluttered and heads surged. The entire street was crowded with people on both sides. The crowded procedures even gave the police force responsible for maintaining order a headache. This was the result of the propaganda after the Battle of the Snowfield, where the Abro officials led by Shur Miao used the Red Lotus Steel Lion to suppress the MA army. The destruction of Edmonton had become a foregone conclusion. After 300 years, the people of Abro were once again shrouded in the shadows of the ancient calamity sacrifice. In their moment of despair, they suddenly saw the seemingly endless calamity sacrifice that had walked out of the legends being wantonly slaughtered by a steel lion. The result was imaginable. As the time of the triumphant return of the troops, led by the Red Lotus Steel Lion, approached, the crowd on both sides of the main road began to become noisy. From a distance, even if the expression of the faces of the crowd could not be seen clearly, it could be seen from the small flags that were still flying in the hands of the crowd that the people gathered on both sides of the street were looking forward to the steel lion that suppressed the MA army that destroyed Edmonton with its own strength. There are so many people. Miss Lakis. On the main road, on the temporary viewing platform, Gudelia, who had changed into a capable woman's suit, looked at the waves of noisy crowd and could not help but sigh. That's right. It seems that everyone likes State Zero very much. Lakis was still wearing the purple dress. Although it seemed a little out of place with the surrounding crowd, it was impossible to find any fault with it. After all, just Lakis standing there, her beauty and temperament were already the best in the audience, making it impossible for people to ignore her. In contrast, the exceptionally capable Gudelia was more like Lakis's little follower. In fact, it was exactly so. When Ray Minkai and State Zero went to the extreme north, Lakis took the initiative to take over the work of communication between the Ironflower Regiment and Abro. Through Lakis's strong communication and negotiation skills, the cooperation between the Ironflower Regiment and Abro was quickly on the right track, and they began to cooperate more deeply. Originally, according to Sher Miao's initial idea, the Ironflower Regiment was only invited by Abro to cooperate with Abro's newly established armed forces to carry out related training work. But with Lux's help, the Ironflower Regiment quickly gained recognition from Abro and began to operate in Abro with the special identity of Abro's first independent armored regiment. Even though the Ironflower Regiment would be restricted in many areas due to their special identity as the first Abro independent armored regiment. But in the long run, an official identity that allowed him to travel freely among the major economic circles was far more appropriate than the identity of the Taiwan Regiment, which could be subjected to difficulties by the local officials at any time. When Olga received the letter of appointment from Sher Miao, he was completely dumbfounded. It was not until he returned to the base that the newly appointed commander of the 1st Abro Independent Armor Regiment gradually came to his senses. Ah, Miss Lakis, this is Olga, who had been reading the appointment letter from day to night and from night to morning, finally couldn't take it anymore and went to find Lux. This is the proof of identity for the Ironflower Regiment to operate within the borders of Abreu, no, within the boundaries of Earth. Commander Olga, you have to keep it well. Olga's incredulous expression, as if he was dreaming, made Lux smile. This appointment letter was, in fact, something that had already been finalized. In Ray Minkai and Lux's plan, no matter how terrifying the tusked Lion State Zero and Ray Minkai's combat power were, they still needed to have an official identity. Otherwise, after this ancient sacrificial battle, their ally, Lars Horn, might turn against them and frame the tusked Lion State Zero as another mass sacrificial. Of course, Ray Minkai was still the same as before. He didn't want to be the scapegoat. Therefore, Olga, the commander of the Ironflower Regiment, became the lucky one that was pushed onto the stage. I know about this, but is this really a good idea? Miss Lakis, facing Olga's doubts, Lux bluntly expressed Olga's concerns. Commander Olga, do you think that accepting this appointment letter will cause everyone in the Ironflower Regiment to leave this big family and go their separate ways, right? Along the way, Lux could see Olga's dedication and attachment to the Ironflower Regiment. The main purpose of gathering so many orphans and divorcees to create the Ironflower Regiment was to give them a home. This point would not have any conflict with the letter of appointment at all. Commander Olga, the Ironflower Regiment is everyone's home. This is undeniable. But people will always grow up. Don't tell me you want the younger members of the Ironflower Regiment to continue driving the Mobile Engineer or MS to fight on the battlefield. This question stunned Olga on the spot, and at the same time, it also ended the conversation. Until the whole city was celebrating the triumphant return of the Red Lotus Steel Lion, Olga didn't come to find Lux. Miss Lux, he's here. His Excellency Ray Minkai is back. When the sound of a cannon was heard, Gudelia, who was standing next to Lux, also cried out in surprise. At the end of the main road, at the entrance of the city that everyone was looking at, a huge figure suddenly appeared. Soft mane scattered around the steelhead. shining with a golden light like a crown blade. His eyes were narrow and cold, but there was also a flash of cold light in them. Sharp and terrifying claws. With every step it took, it was able to scratch the hard ground of the main road with its sharp claws. It had a huge and mighty body, red armor like the flames of a red lotus. This was the scene of the Iron Lion slowly entering the city. Every time the red lotus steel lion passed by an intersection, there would be loud cries of surprise, followed by cheers. Looks like our hero has returned in triumph. When the cheers reached the peak, Shirmiao Higashi finally appeared on the viewing platform. Teacher, Shirmiao, you're here. Seeing the old man who could still maintain a straight posture even though he was old, the surrounding people all showed a respectful expression and greeted Shirmiao in unison. I'm here. I don't dare to be late for an important ceremony to welcome a hero. Moreover, even if Sir Ray Minkai can forgive me, Miss Lux probably won't let this old bag of bones go. Shirmiao greeted the surrounding people and looked at Lux and Gudelia as he joked. Representative Shirmiao, you must be joking. Lakis smiled and didn't take Shirmiao's teasing seriously. Even if Shirmiao did not come, Ray Minkai and Lux would not find anything wrong. What's more, even if the Abro government wants Lame Minkai to step onto this stage, it won't be an easy task. Miss Lux, I'm very sorry. After this victory ceremony, the Ironflower Regiment will probably move out again. Is that so? We've already prepared for this. Isn't that so? Representative Shirmiao. For this world, the revival of the ancient disaster ritual was undoubtedly a disaster. But for Ray Minkai and Lux, the mastermind behind the ancient disaster ritual was their real goal. For this reason, Ray Minkai must go against the ancient disaster ritual that was spread all over the world. Of course, no matter how powerful the Tusked Lion State Zero was, it could only take care of one side of the battlefield. Looking at the world, Ray Minkai's eyes were naturally fixed on a man who should have found the true meaning that he had been searching for a long time, and a woman who might have returned to the fleet. As the ancient disaster ritual's attack became more and more intense, the reconnaissance satellites in geosynchronous orbit became busier and busier. Furthermore, in an environment where they frequently shifted their orbits to investigate the ancient doomed sacrificial army that was active on Earth's surface, the consumption rate of these reconnaissance satellites continued to increase, causing the already stretched Earth's outer orbit command fleet to feel the pressure on their shoulders grow heavier. Commander, the emergency supplies from the Dort satellite cluster have been stored. In order to solve the problem of the excessive consumption of the reconnaissance satellites, Calta did not hesitate to personally contact the Dort colonial satellite cluster. Fortunately, the other party did not make things difficult for Calta. Instead, they readily agreed to provide an emergency batch of supplies to solve the urgent needs of the Earth's outer orbit command fleet. Later, after the Dort colonial satellite cluster finished processing the relevant matters, more supplies would be sent over. This gave Calta some confidence in the upcoming landing battle. Commander, Abro called. Coincidentally, after the Earth's outer orbit command fleet received the support supplies from the Dort colonial satellite cluster, Abro, who had been silent, took the initiative to contact him. This lifted Calta's spirits. Since returning to the Earth's outer orbit command fleet, Calta's mind had been occupied by choices. The situation of the Earth's command fleet was not very good. The troops that could perform landing operations could not do everything. With his best efforts, Calta could only maintain one of the battlefields on Earth and maintain the advantage over the ancient disaster ritual. As for the other battlefields, Calta could not do anything. Connect, put on the main screen. With thousands of thoughts in his mind, Calta forced himself to quickly adjust his state of mind. The next second, the old face that Calta had already seen appeared on the main screen. However, the other party seemed to deliberately put on an unfamiliar attitude. Guihan, I am Abro's representative, Shirmiao Donghu. Guihan, I am the commander of the Earth's outer orbit command fleet, Calta Yethu. How is Abro doing now? Do you need help from our fleet? No. Abro doesn't need any help. On the contrary, Abro has temporarily eliminated the threat of disaster ritual to us. Now, the purpose of taking the initiative to contact Gallahorn is to confirm with you what we, Abro, can do. Sure Meow's words immediately set off a discussion on the bridge. Kalta looked around, and his sharp gaze silenced his subordinates who were gossiping. At the same time, he quickly pulled out the reconnaissance satellite above Abro and did a rough scan of Abro's territory. In the end, it caused another round of discussion. There was no battle with ancient disaster ritual in Abro. If it weren't for a reconnaissance satellite passing over Edmonton, the people on the bridge would have suspected that Abro was a traitor like his Nerio Farid. Quiet, Kalta shouted in a low voice, and after he made his subordinates shut up again, he slowly nodded at the screen. I already know the situation. Now Gallahorn's headquarters was organizing a fleet and preparing to carry out a plan to wipe out the MA army that was raging in Oceania. If Abro still has the strength, he might as well take the initiative to contact Larshorn headquarters. Kalta's face was very calm, and he was not as surprised as his subordinates when they saw that there was no trace of ancient disaster ritual in Abro. Perhaps, in her heart, she already had great confidence in the knight who once captured her. Of course, this was undoubtedly contradictory, but Kalta just knew that with the knight, Abro's current situation would not suffer a big blow. Now it seemed that for Abro, just losing Edmonton was the luckiest economic circle in the world. Oceania? I understand. Thank you very much for your guidance, Commander Kalta. Then forgive my rudeness. Commander. In the face of Sure Meow's departure, Kalta nodded slightly and no longer spoke. It wasn't until the clock turned one full circle that Kalta raised his right hand again. Attention all fleet. Immediately begin to execute all matters before the landing battle. Modify the landing battle target. Our Earth's Outer Orbit Command Fleet will carry out the mission of supporting Oceania. All relevant personnel immediately prepare for everything. Yes, Commander. Yes, Sir Kalta. Kalta's gaze crossed the busy bridge, passed through the porthole, and fell on the blue planet on the right side of the fleet, and fell on the continent with large clouds floating in the sky. A red lion? It seems that the night's secret is not as simple as what I see. The cannons roared, and missiles soared into the sky, sprinkling smoke on the sea, forming a wall of smoke that covered a large area of the sea. And in this smoke, armored landing ships loaded with mobile engineers broke through the wind and waves. Under the cover of many grays, they rushed to the beach and released all the mobile engineers loaded in their internal cabins. This was the largest fleet assembled by Larshorn in a short period of time. By the time it reached the Gulf of Carpentaria in the north of Oceania, most of the city, named Carpentaria, had already fallen. Looking at the citizens fleeing from the burning city, McGillis did not hesitate to issue an order to start the operation immediately. At the same time, as the pilot of Gao Das Bailai, he was the first to appear on the front line. In this battle, let the name of Bailai once again resound in human society. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.